Good morning, everyone. I am Andrew Martin. I serve as the Chancellor at Washington University, and I'd like to welcome you to the Olin Business School. It is really my pleasure to be with you this morning for this important event, Data for Good, Attracting and Retaining Talent in St. Louis. Today, we gather to address a critical challenge facing our region: how to build and nurture a thriving talent ecosystem that will drive St. Louis forward. This isn't just a business issue or an academic concern. It's a mission that touches every aspect of our community's future. At Washington University, we are committed to being not just in St. Louis, but for St. Louis. This event exemplifies that commitment. It brings together leaders from business, academia, government, and the nonprofit sector to tackle one of our region's most pressing needs. The panels you'll hear from today represent the collaborative spirit that defines St. Louis at its best. They'll explore how we can leverage data and analytics to make informed decisions about attracting and retaining top talent. More importantly, they'll discuss how we can turn those insights into action. Why does this matter so much? Because talent is the lifeblood of any thriving region. When we cultivate a robust talent ecosystem, we don't just benefit individual businesses or institutions, we uplift entire communities. We spark innovation, drive economic growth, and create opportunities that ripple out to touch every corner of our city and region. As Chancellor, I'm proud of the role Washington University plays in this ecosystem. We're not just educating the next generation of leaders, we're actively engaging with our community to solve real-world problems. Today's event is a perfect example of this philosophy in action. By bringing together diverse perspectives and applying rigorous data analysis to our challenges, we're laying the groundwork for solutions that can transform our city's future. I want to extend my gratitude to Dean Mazzio and the Olin Business School for hosting this event, to the Center for Analytics and Business Insights for their groundbreaking research, and for partnering with the St. Louis Initiatives team in my office in planning this event, and to all of our panelists and participants for lending their expertise to this very important conversation. As we proceed, I encourage everyone to engage fully, to challenge assumptions, and to think boldly about what we can achieve together. So thank you all for being here and for your commitment to making St. Louis a beacon of opportunity and innovation. Now I'm going to turn things over to the co-directors of the Center for Analytics and Business Insights, Michael Wall and Seetharu Sutharaman. Please.
Thank you, Chancellor Martin, and good morning, everyone, and thank you for being here. This is really exciting to see the level of engagement that there's been for this event. And what I think it demonstrates is how collectively we all are determined to help make the vision that Chancellor Martin just talked about a reality. And so what I'm going to do quickly is just kind of set the stage for who is and what is the Center for Analytics and Business Insights, and share a little bit more about how this initiative came to be. And then Seethu is going to really walk into some of the research insights that were uncovered through our methodology, and then I'll close it out with really a stepping stone to what's next, which will be our panel discussions. How do we think about activating this research? But in terms of who and what the Center for Analytics and Business Insights is, or CABI for short, is we are one of Olin's 6 research centers, and where we really focus is on how do we use data and technology and even AI to solve really complex problems, not just those centered on the bottom line in a business context, but also really complex societal issues. So Seethu and I have been a part of, I think, 10 or 11 research initiatives over the last 7 or 8 years. It's been centered on this very topic. And so in terms of who we serve, there are really 4 constituencies. The first, of course, is business. And you may have seen their photos before the start of the event, but we are very fortunate to be supported by an impressive group of local leaders that really help make this event and all the work that we do possible. And beyond that, we really work hard to create opportunities for our students, specifically with experiential learning and accredited courses. In fact, the research that we're going to walk you through here in just a moment was actually developed with the help of student teams. And then the third constituency is, of course, the community. And we're going to really have a theme today of connection, cooperation, and collaboration. And that's really what these events are all about. And then, of course, finally, how do we benefit society? But before going any further, I specifically want to take the time to call out some key stakeholders that really made all of this possible. Lisa Weingarth reached out to me and said, "Hey, Mike, are you around? I'd love to get together for a cup of coffee." And we met in the Knight Center courtyard, and she had this idea of how we can use data and technology to help better attract and retain talent in St. Louis. I'm like, I think we could do something like that. So that curiosity question is what really sparked this initiative. And with the support of Maggie and Norma and Tim, we were able to do some really impressive work in a very short amount of time. And the WashU student team is also one that we really want to call. They went above and beyond. So you think about it, this was a 3-credit course for them. They probably put in 9 credits worth of work during that semester. They just really did an amazing job. And so we're really fortunate to have had them be part of this commitment. And some of them are here in the room today, which is great. So our strategic question was, why do students choose the opportunities that they choose after leaving WashU? And the follow-up question was, what can we do as a community to keep them here? And this visual that I'm showing you is from an MBA from 2021, Tyler Edwards. And he said, "Michael, can we do office hours?" I'm like, "I got these offers. I'm not really sure which one to take." And we were talking, and he pulled out this scoring system that he created. And my favorite metric on there is nightlife vibes. And it made me think to myself, to be young. But the point of that is that this is a complex decision. What we call in marketing, this is a high consideration decision. This is not one that doesn't come with complex conscious and subconscious factors. And so that was our job. How do we unravel this complexity? How do we get to the core of what really matters most to students? What actually drives them to make a choice? That was our task. And so we studied a significant amount of existing academic literature. The student team conducted focus groups and interviews, and we learned a lot as it relates to the factors that play a role in decisioning. So I'm sure it's no surprise, personal factors play a really important role. But those career opportunity factors, those are also really important. But there are also location factors. And so these are the factors that we uncover, but we don't yet know, like, how much do these factors really matter? Meaning, which one weights more in a customer's mind versus not, and how does that ultimately drive decisions? And what was exciting about this, I'm so glad Sam is here to be on our second panel today, because this research actually is analogous with another research project we did in the fall of 22, which is really centered on how do we get companies to relocate here to St. Louis. And what we learned is that there are a lot of synergies. These decision-making factors are very consistent. I'm going to steal some water here from, I'm going to say this is Giselle's water because she goes on next. But I'll get her another glass before. All right, so there were a lot of synergies. And really, it was Sam's initiative, Sam's vision back in the fall, which really inspired this creative idea. So we had a challenge. Same challenge for the Cortex project. When you talk to students, there are various perspectives, and there's a lot of uncertainty behind why they choose what they choose. So the student team did an amazing job. They actually recorded, with the students' permission, all the focus groups and interviews. And they analyzed the word frequency of what are the different words and phrases that students use. You can see the list of those there. And what Cynthia is going to share in just a second is that this actually contradicts what our research uncovered. So how do we overcome this challenge? When we read some of these quotes, there's lack of certainty, there's a lot of complexity, there are various perspectives. So to get you thinking about this, I'm going to ask you a rhetorical question, but one that I'll be subconsciously judging you on. Do you brush your teeth? Do you brush your teeth? And I ask students this in my class all the time, but I actually ask them to raise their hand. And the reason I do this is for them to begin the process of considering just how complex the decisions that we make are. So, of course, our demographics and geographics that you see on the outskirts, those play a role in our choice for sure. But really what I want you to focus on is the middle. Our background, our behaviors, our psychographics. These factors collectively work inside of our brains in ways that we can't even understand to dictate our perception and our choice. So this was our challenge. And those market research methods that I mentioned before, those are helpful to get started, but there's a lot of unknowns that remain. You're going to hear from Tony Sardello in our third panel. He talks to me a lot about the importance of uncovering blind spots. And really, that's what the research was intended to do. How do we find those unknown unknowns? How do we discover things that we didn't even know that we should be paying attention to? And how do we answer questions that we just know we can't get the answers to today? So this was the context behind the research. And this was the challenge right here that we had to really think critically about. And so I'm going to turn it over to Sithu to share more about the process that we took and some of the key insights that we learned. And then from there, I'll close it out with some next steps on how we can utilize this research to make better decisions in the future.
Okay, thanks, Michael. And it's exciting to see so many of you show up for a morning event like this. Welcome to Olin, welcome to WashU. So I will take you through, in a nutshell, how this research unfolded, what actually we did, what were the key findings. And we want to keep time at the end for Q&A. So let me see how I pace myself to determine how much time we have left for Q&A. So Michael set the stage in terms of what the problem is. So we are trying to understand what does it take for a student to consider St. Louis in a competitive manner vis-a-vis some other cities when they are trading one job offer versus another in terms of where to locate or relocate. So for that, we employed a technique called conjoint analysis. Just curious, by show of hands, how many of you have heard of this term called conjoint analysis? Wow, that's a good number of you. That's exciting. So for the rest of you, conjoint is a technique that is a little subliminal under the surface in terms of uncovering from the students or consumers in general how they pay attention to attributes and trade off one versus the other in terms of how they make decisions. And like Michael said, if one came flat out and asked, hey, how important is salary vis-a-vis the climate of a city in terms of how you would consider one job offer versus the other, students may not have a good way of, in fact, answering that question. Well, this technique, which is grounded in reality in terms of presenting situations that are much like the choice situations people face in real life, gets the answers that we believe are more truthful and therefore externally valid. So here is how conjoint works. So in this survey, which was administered online, one would ask a question like this. By the way, we incentivized WashU students to participate by using an attractive proposition like this that we threw at them. Said, here is a chance to win $200. And we made, I believe, 3 such Amazon gift cards available. So we spent $600 and we got a pretty good response rate, going by how response rates tend to be for surveys like this. Okay, coming back to this question. So what you see on the screen here is a pair of job offers. So each job offer is articulated on 8 dimensions. Those dimensions come from that previous graphic that Michael showed in terms of here are the key attributes that secondary research has revealed to be top of mind while people make decisions like this. So each job offer is defined in a particular way on each of those 8 dimensions. So for example, the salary on the left offer is low and the right offer is also low. Now, what does low mean? Now, that is defined in the startup screen, which educates the student in terms of how they should interpret these so-called qualitative terms. So low in our case meant 10% below industry average. Moderate would mean industry average, and high would mean 10% above. So likewise, there were specific definitions associated with each level along these 8 dimensions. So there are 8 attributes, and each was defined to take 3 values. So if you think back to your high school permutations and combinations, that's a lot of possible job offers. In fact, 6,561 to be exact. That's how many hypothetical job offers can be constructed in that 8-dimensional space. Now we choose two of them and then ask the student to compare those two. Say which of these two looks more attractive to you. And this is a pretty complex question to answer. So we incentivize them, and they spent about a minute on a question like this. And we asked 25 questions of this kind. So they are spending about 25 minutes just answering the conjoint part of the survey, never mind the demographic questions that come later. So I said 6,561 potential offers, and we are showing 2 at a time and 25 such job scenarios, right? Again, from 6,561, how many pairs are in principle possible? 22 million, believe it or not. From the 22 million, we are cherry picking a systematic set of 25. So there is experimental design science behind this as to which 25 to show in order to maximize the information we are getting from this survey. So then if you look at the bottom of this graphic, you see the option none of the above. So the student has the choice of saying, hey, neither of these looks appealing enough to me to say I'll pick one of the two. So which means the student is effectively saying I'll continue my job search if these are the only two offers I'm reflecting on. So this technique called conjoint goes back to 1969, which is when it was invented by psychometricians at Stanford. And this has been used to good effect in many applications across fields. In fact, two economists won a Nobel Prize for their work using this tool about the time I became a faculty member at WashU. So I've been here since '98. I believe in 2000 is when they won the Nobel Prize for their work. One of them, Dan McFadden at UC Berkeley, used this technique to advise the Bay Area Transit Authority on how they should think about public transportation. Okay, so that sets the stage. Okay, so now what did we do with the information we got? So on a student by student basis, by the way, we got 174 respondents. It was a pretty decent sample size, collected within a couple of weeks, in fact, across campus. And this shows the average finding that was revealed. So on average, if we draw a respondent at random from the WashU student population, this is how the 8 attributes stack up relative to each other in terms of relative attribute importance. So what does this tell us? There is one attribute that stands out, right? So if you mechanically allocated 100 points across these 8 attributes, each of them should account for 12.5% importance. So that puts this in context. Salary is almost 3 times or 2.5 times as important as a mindless allocation of points across attributes. And conversely, community alignment of city. So this was defined as how much does this city feel like home to you? The sense of belonging. That's how the 3 levels were defined here. So at least among these 8, that turned out to be right at the bottom. So that's almost half as important as what the mindless allocation would give us. So this was the average finding. But now this graphic can be constructed student by student. So the experimental nature of this design makes it possible to estimate these importances at the individual respondent level. But what I'm showing is some kind of an average finding. Okay, so then what did we do? We tried to do a deeper dive. So we said, well, would these importances vary by gender? What if we separated the female student from the male student? And what we found is, no, they don't. The average importances are in the same ballpark, agnostic of gender. And that was true of a variety of demographic variables. So demographics really did not explain how people think about job offers or cities to relocate to. In fact, I'm going to go to this graphic and I'll come back to that. So then we went to separating students into grad students versus undergraduate students. So this is a noisy picture. So below for each attribute, you see 3 bars. The bottommost bar in gray is that average finding that I showed in the previous slide. Now above that, you have a red and a black bar. So the red is undergrad and the black is grad. So this indicates some interesting differences between grad students and undergraduate students. Here are two that you can pay attention to. Look at climate. Clearly, that matters a whole lot more to undergrads than grads. And look at perceived safety level of the city in which the job offer is from. Safety seems to matter a whole lot more to graduate students than undergraduate students. So I would call out those two. So these kinds of differences start emerging once you deeper dive into the data. So then we asked, hey, are the 7 schools in WashU different from each other? Yes, there are 7 schools here on campus. We have an 8th coming up in a couple of years. So here I'm showing the difference between McKelvey, our School of Engineering, where my daughter is a PhD student right now, and the Olin Business School, where we are. And while the differences are not as stark as in this graphic, there are a couple of interesting distinctions if you can catch them. Look at continuing career opportunities. That matters a whole lot more to a B school student than an engineering school student. And look at cost of housing. Well, across the board, it's important, but it seems to be significantly more important to an engineering school student. So these kinds of differences started emerging once we went beyond simple demography. So then we did some what if simulations. So we said, look, at least for these 174 respondents who are a random and representative sample of the WashU student population, what if we tried to predict what they would do in hypothetical situations? So here in this simulation, we are saying, let's take an archetype city like Austin. Now that's a competing city to St. Louis in terms of how one defines it on those 8 attributes. And if we made our own subjective assessment of St. Louis on those 8 dimensions, here is how St. Louis stacks up. Of course, some of these dimensions are job offer specific. So we came up with hypothetical job offers where the St. Louis offer gave moderate level of salary, while the Austin offer gave high level of salary, and so on. So what we are trying to show you here is, if the job offer in St. Louis quite doesn't stack up on the salary front, which is the most important attribute, and then there are differences on 2 other dimensions between these 2 cities. St. Louis is, in some objective term, a relatively inexpensive city compared to Austin. So it's a better city on that dimension. But in terms of perceived safety, Austin is perceived to be safer. So it seems like there's a trade-off on those 2. And then, what did I do? Okay, and on the salary front, we set up the St. Louis offer to be less attractive. Now the simulator, which takes the student preferences for those attributes into account, says they are almost on even keel. So an average WashU student would be about 52% likely to relocate to Austin versus 43% likely to take up the St. Louis offer. Another way of thinking about this is about 43% of the student population at large. If everybody at WashU were resolving these 2 job offers against each other, 43% would stay in St. Louis. Okay, then we changed the setting of the simulation. We said, what if this job offer in St. Louis paid 10% more? All else being the same, what if the salary level was now high in the St. Louis offer? And look at what happened. So basically, we actually ended up switching the salary roles. Austin was now made moderate. Dramatic swing. So these are the kinds of what-if games that we can play. So if you had a large enough population that represented, the population of interest, we can really, as policymakers, get some good insights like this as to which levers need to be pulled in order to make St. Louis or an offer in St. Louis more attractive. And then we segmented the respondents a different way. So we had a question that asked, how likely are you to stay in St. Louis? So they could choose one of 3 options: very likely, somewhat likely, unlikely. So if we divided respondents on those terms and looked at the relative importances, there is a difference that emerges on one dimension: continuing career opportunities. In marketing, we have this adage that says the gold customer is maxed out. The silver customer can be, with enough persuasion, made to be gold. The lead customer is a gone case, right? So your marketing dollars must be spent on the silver customer. So applying that thinking here, somewhat likely is the customer who could potentially be persuaded or student to become most likely to stay. So viewed that way, maybe our first order of interest should not be continuing career opportunities. Students aren't thinking that far into the future to think about the local cohort of employment. So therefore, maybe our resources should be allocated across the other attributes. So these are, again, some of the kind of ways policymakers can think in terms of how to manage student location. Okay, one last point, and then I'll throw it open to questions. So on those same terms as to what does it take to make a student consider St. Louis more seriously, we continued the simulation like this. So we took that silver customer, or somewhat likely to say student, and said, just looking at that subpopulation of respondents who are somewhat likely to stay, how would St. Louis fare if it became more attractive on the friends and family proximity front? So that was one of the 8 attributes, where a city could be within driving distance of friends and family, within a long driving distance of friends and family, within flying distance. So those are the 3 levels. So if we went to the somewhat close, which is the middle bucket, and Austin is generally far away from where people who work in Austin's family and friends are, then here is how the predicted probabilities play out. Now let's compare that to making St. Louis perceived to be safer. So we get a bad rap in the press about, we are in the top 5 most unsafe cities in the country, right? Unfairly so in many ways. But suppose there was a marketing campaign rolled out to make St. Louis perceived to be only moderately unsafe as opposed to, in the worst bucket of the 3, then here is how the probability swings. So what is the story? We are trying to pull one lever at a time. And if these are the only 2 levers we are comparing against each other, it seems like this is a better lever to pull. But unfortunately, it's not a lever that you can pull. You can't convince the prospects, family, and friends to relocate closer, right? So you must think about this somewhat differently. This is a targeting problem. This is a marketing problem. So here, what you need to do is position the city a certain way. There, you need to cherry pick or target the students who, to begin with, come from certain parts of the country. So very different strategies, right? So these are all, again, some of the insights that can inform decisions. I think I'm right on time.
Yeah,
I'll hand over to Michael. He'll close up, and then we'll open to questions.
All right, thanks, Sithu. So this is really fascinating work, and what we wanted to drive home is that this is a tool that we can use and can continue to use. So although we're running you through hypothetical scenarios, this tool that we've built and the data that it collects enables us to move past that, to actually have it as a resource that we can use in our community to make better decisions. So what are those decisions? So what you're looking at here in this visual is a way we can think about customer segmentation, or in this case, student segmentation. And what we learned in our research is that St. Louis is actually incredibly well positioned to succeed with many segments. So at the very top, you see communication and education. What does this mean? It means that this segment of students are ones that we can deliver for. We align to what matters most to them, and it's simply a matter of creating educational campaigns or awareness campaigns to make sure that they understand the value that we bring to them. The next bucket down, we defined as minimal investment. You can almost just think of this as operational optimization. So one of the most inspiring parts of this work, similar to the Cortex project a couple of years ago, is just how many stakeholders here in the community raised their hand to participate. There are so many organizations and individuals that are centered on making St. Louis a wonderful and prosperous place for decades to come, and we can leverage that. So when we think about investment here, it's more about just optimizing the things that we're already doing. How do we just do them a little bit better? Now, as we get into the yellow and the orange, this is where more investment is going to be needed. And this is where our panel discussions are going to be incredibly important today. Moderate investment, think more as near term or minimal, more near term, whereas material investment is going to be long term. These are going to be seeds that we're going to plant today that may not grow for 10, 15, or 20 years, but as anyone here knows, if you've ever been a part of any strategic planning process, you're looking at both the near term, the midterm, and the long term, and you have to allocate your budget towards different goals. But as Seethu mentioned a moment ago, there are just going to be some students that we're not going to be able to attract and retain, and that's okay. Marketing 101 is you should not try and be everything to everyone. That's one of the worst mistakes you can make. But that doesn't mean that we can't build powerful relationships with these students. One of the most inspiring things that I see here at Olin, and I know this is true across all of our schools, is how many alumni want to give back to the community. Our new Dean Mazio talks about this. He went on essentially a road show. How many miles did you fly, Mike? Whatever. Yeah, 6 digits of miles and driving to meet with alumni all over the United States and all over the world. And as it relates to engagement, it couldn't be higher. So what this means is we have a responsibility to make sure that students, regardless of what school they choose in St. Louis, have the best experience possible so that we inspire them to stay connected in our community and give back in other ways. So we have a blueprint. We can make more strategic decisions that align to what matters most to the segments that we have the highest likelihood to succeed with. I want to share with you such a decision. This is one that I wasn't aware of, the student team. You know, our students, it was great. We had students from both McKelvey and Olin on the team, and our students, they're really smart. And they uncover insights that I always wonder. I ask myself, you know, I teach here. Can I actually get in here? It's a question I ponder a lot. But what they asked was, they said, look, this Campus Philly initiative was unbelievable. They invested in their students. And just look at some of these statistics. I'm not one for wanting to put a lot of statistics on a slide. I'd rather just speak to it. But the point was they invested. They invested, they connected with stakeholders across their community, they cooperated with stakeholders across the community, and they collaborated. And what it led to was a significant return on that investment of both time, strategic thinking, and resources. And so that's what we're most excited about. Don't get me wrong, Seethu and I were thrilled to have an opportunity to share this research because it's so exciting. But the real exciting part are the 3 panel discussions that are going to come next, and the closing remarks by Dean Mazio is going to really help us think about when we walk out this door today, how do we make sure that we don't just say, oh, this is really interesting, that was really cool and exciting, as opposed to what steps can I take today based on this information to help us better attract and retain talent here in St. Louis. That's our mission together. And as Chancellor Martin said, it aligns very well with the plans and the priorities laid out in the Here and Next plan. So with that, we have about 5 minutes left, so we're going to open it up for questions. Okay, we did great on time, which Seethu and I are pretty proud of. But we do want to make sure and stay on time because the panel discussions and the closing remarks are going to really, I think, be the most powerful part of our discussion. So with that, Seethu and I will turn it over to questions. Yes, in the back. There's one in the back there. All right, yeah.
Yeah, that's a terrific question. Our study doesn't get into that, right? These salaries are articulated such that you must think about it as your starting salary over the coming years. But that's a very interesting marketing question of how should salaries be articulated? Is it as a lifetime kind of a stream of earnings, or at least over 5 years versus 1 year and so on? Yeah, worth thinking about, especially considering that turned out to be the most important attribute viewed even in single period terms, right? Yeah.
Well, you know, it's a great question, and this is, so it's funny, we try not to tell a student what we think they should do, but students come to us and ask these questions. We have these offers. Kim Whitler is a professor at Darden at the University of Virginia. She was a CMO like me, made a career change. We both left industry, entered academia, and we collaborate a lot. And she wrote a piece in Forbes that she just resurfaced last week, really talking about the efforts that she takes to try and educate students to look at the long game and really understand that your initial salary really maybe should be something that you consider, but not let it drive ultimately your choice. So I think your question really gets to the core of what we probably need to think about doing better, is helping educate our students on looking at the totality of the near term, but also what the long term looks like. Dave Menifee, who used to be the chief strategy officer here at Centene, once said, I started selling toilet paper at Procter & Gamble, and it carried me through the rest of my career for 30 years. Now, he's being humble in that statement, but I think it's a point well taken as it relates to your question.
Yeah, just one more point. I think we cannot convince employers across the board to pay 10% more for these simulations to come to life. So then the question is, does the city do a match of, hey, on the first year, if you choose to stay here as opposed to leaving, we'll pay a lump sum of so much. That's one way. You mentioned taxes. I lived in Houston for a bit when I worked at Rice University, and then said, bad idea, and came back to WashU. Texas doesn't have state taxes. And perhaps that goes a long way in how people view Houston and Dallas compared to some other cities in the country. Yeah, good point.
Just curious how you defined salary. Was it a combination of like total benefits or just the salary? Because I think sometimes that can be very different.
So it goes into the educational question. So no, we just viewed it as 10% above industry average, 10% below. That's how we defined it for the students. I can say that from the interview process, it didn't appear that students are really thinking about, going back to the previous question, not really thinking about the totality of that. So for example, if my out-of-pocket healthcare expenses are $700 a month versus $150 a month, that makes a significant difference in your take-home pay. So this goes back to education. Really good question.
Students from St. Louis into St. Louis, or attracting talent from all over the country? Because the reason I ask is that if you're asking students who are already in St. Louis, there's going to be an inherent bias in their responses, right?
Sure.
Because they already are in St. Louis, and they know St. Louis better than other cities.
So I think, what we're fortunate in St. Louis is we have an amazing cohort of universities. And so we are attracting talent from all over the world already, regardless of where they're from. So yes, we are focused on those that are already here, but the students that are already here come from all over, not only the United States, but all over the world. And as you know, they're incredibly talented. So really the question was, they're here because we have this amazing cohort of universities. What do we do now to keep them here, both near and long term?
Yeah, in marketing, there's a famous line that says retention is easier than acquisition. So the first problem is, how do we convince people who are already bought into St. Louis in some sense? They've invested 4 years of their life here to stay on. So that's the focus here. I think we are 1 minute past.
We're at 1 minute past, but we will have
to talk to you offline.
And please feel free to come up with us during the break or after the event. We're going to be sticking around for questions. And I think the panel discussions are going to really drive the opportunity to drive more questions. And as we close, what we just want to highlight is that there's a lot more we can do with data, and we're working with the university to actually look at historical data to couple with forward and backward looking insights. So thank you for the opportunity. I'm going to introduce our first panel. So Giselle Marcus is going to come up and moderate our first panel, which is fantastic. And as she's coming up with the team, I'm going to take this water and I'm going to switch it with this water. Oh, she already has her own, so we're good.
My mantra of teamwork makes the dream work with my colleague, Michael there. So thank you. Good morning, everyone. I see we do have some folks that are standing in the back. There's no need for that. So think about if you were at church, or actually if you were in a classroom. Many don't want to come to the front, but there are many seats available if you would like to have one. And we would welcome it, because standing up in the back makes me a little nervous. All right. All right, so I am delighted to introduce this panel, and I'll begin by introducing myself. My name is Giselle Marcus. I am here at this amazing institution here at Olin. I am the Vice Dean of the Office of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, and I also am a professor of practice for diversity, equity, and inclusion as well. I am going to share with you very briefly our panelists. Just based on interest of time, I am going to suggest that you all take the opportunity to look each one of these individuals up either on LinkedIn or by way of Google, because they are very distinguished in their field. And I am going to begin with Joe Blomker. He is to your right, my left, and he is the CEO of Maryville Consulting right here in St. Louis. And next we have Norma Guerra, who is the Associate Vice Chancellor for Career Development and Education right here at Washington University. And next we have Tom Henry. He is the Chief Data and Deputy Chief Information Officer at Schnucks Market. And last but certainly not least, we have Melissa Meyer. She is the Global HR Director for New Balance. Yes, New Balance is here in town. If you didn't know that, they're located in Sunset Hills. All right. So I'm going to begin with my first question, and because I believe that chivalry is not dead, I'm going to begin with one of our ladies, and that will be with Melissa Meyer. And my first question to you, Melissa, is, first of all, we're glad to know you're here. And my question to you is, as a global HR director that has extensive experience in attracting talent, but also who works for a company who has won awards for being attractive in recruiting talent, can you share with us some of the strategies that have driven the success of your organization?
Yeah, sure. And thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be here as well. And as you mentioned, Giselle, an important point that a lot of people do not know that New Balance is here in St. Louis. Our global headquarters is based in Boston. And so during the aftermath of the pandemic, as you know, our associates were coming back into our local office in Sunset Hills, which has about 100 or so corporate associates, you know, our leadership team there really asked ourselves, like, how do we want to show up to make sure that we can be really intentional and strategic about being in the community and attracting talent? You know, we recruit and we attract talent for global e-commerce, the back end of our software platform for our website. And so again, we needed to be strategic and thinking like, we're not recruiting massive amounts of talent, but we're here and we want people to know we're here. And so we just really leaned in on our values and we did a few things. One, we put our name on the buildings. So that was a pretty simple one. People didn't know we were here because we didn't have our name on the building. So we invested in our office in Sunset Hills. We totally revamped the space with the idea that we want our space to be a hybrid environment where software engineers and where e-commerce professionals want to come and work. So we made that investment. And then we also were intentional about making investments in the community and thinking about how we show up and how do we want to engage talent in the community. So we do partner with Washington University. We work very closely with CABE students. We've done some interactive projects with New Balance. We also have a couple software engineering interns. So that experiential piece and really cultivating those relationships with students and then being intentional about wanting to bring them into our environment. The other thing that we want to do is sort of lean into our values and thinking about how do we serve the community and how do we want to show up in the community. And so about a year ago, we made a significant investment in partnership with the Greater Chicago Food Bank. We need to make that investment in the community. And then we also want to invest in the broader talent community to really think about, okay, how can we bring in non-traditional talent as well? There's a local program in St. Louis called Launch Code, which essentially retrains and does boot camp code training for software development. And so we've worked very closely with that program. So we're being specific and intentional, and we know that that's kind of cultivating our brand, which people already know about, but we want to make sure that they know we're here and why and what we do. So those are just a few things.
Thank you. Clearly, visibility and intentionality has gone far with your organization. So thank you so much for sharing. My next question I'd like to pose to Joe. You are the founder of Maryville Consulting, and he's been in business for 30 years. And what I find really interesting is he actually competes, his firm competes with McKinsey, Bain, with brands that are very familiar to our students. And what I found very unique about him and his organization is some of the things that they've been able to do to actually compete with global and national other consulting firms. And I would like for him to share with the audience what that looks like and how you've been successful.
Sure. I guess this is a political season, so I might not answer your question directly. And I might just say what I want to say, but I will, I do want to make a point that my involvement in this topic actually started with my involvement with the St. Louis Regional Business Council. So I am one of 120 CEOs in the St. Louis Metro. If you're not familiar with RBC, RBC was founded to focus on improving the quality of life and improving the business climate and business opportunities in the St. Louis region. Priorities for the Regional Business Council have certainly evolved, but there's been a few that have been consistent. But the priorities at this particular point in time are first and foremost a focus on public safety. Why are we focused on public safety? For reasons that have already been highlighted in data. We realize that there's a quality of life issue as it relates to public safety in St. Louis, but certainly from the standpoint of recruiting, it's difficult to recruit people to St. Louis because of the perceptions of safety and the realities of safety in St. Louis. So public safety has been a focus. Another focus has been K-12 education, public education in the St. Louis region. And then a third focus has been talent development. So for over 20 years now, the Regional Business Council has focused on higher education collaboration, a recognition, as was noted, that we have great institutions in this region. We need to work hard to attract and retain that talent. So we put in place a mentor program where we reached out to each of the deans of those schools and we said, if you will nominate 10 or 12 of your best students, we will align them with Regional Business Council executives and help them gain a better appreciation of what the opportunities are here in St. Louis. Those mentors from the Regional Business Council, we made a point with them that their role was not to attract that particular individual to Centene because you're from Centene, but to be an ambassador for the St. Louis region, to actually inform that student, get to know that student, and understand what opportunities exist in the St. Louis region for that individual and match that up. And things have evolved for us over the years as far as how we've viewed that ambassador role, and even thinking about things like, first and foremost, we want to attract that talent to St. Louis, ideally. If we can't attract them to St. Louis, we'd love for them to be working for a St. Louis headquartered company in a location outside of St. Louis, then they're still helping us as a business. But thirdly, we wanted to put, even if we found out early in the discussions that we weren't gonna have a match for this particular person, we wanted to make certain that that every student that was going to school in St. Louis left with as positive an impression of St. Louis as they possibly could. Because we know we have to overcome some perceptions of the St. Louis region. So we have worked hard at evolving that program over the years. And we've gone through the COVID period, and certainly that put a dent into some of that activity and progress. But what I see personally at this point in time is there's an opportunity for kind of a renaissance where the folks in the Regional Business Council recognize this is something they want to be focused on. And now we know, as was described earlier, to the extent there's opportunity for collaboration, that we should be putting a renewed effort into making this kind of program even more successful.
And if you would, I know it's a political season, so you may not answer this question either. But what I do want to know is the Young Professionals Network that you mentioned that was born out of RBC. To dovetail some of the data that we opened with today, can you talk a little bit about what you've learned through that program about young professionals and being here in St. Louis. I'm sure there's much that you've learned from that.
Positively. That's a question I want to answer. Thank you. Thank you. So Young Professionals Network. So we started the mentor program, and after we'd had mentees that had been through the program and accepted employment in St. Louis, when we were working with the deans in that period of time, we actually emphasized diversity. So we said, to the extent you're going to send us 10 or 12 students, make sure you're sending us a diverse population of students, because we're trying to improve the diversity in our business community as well. So we were successful in attracting these folks to St. Louis jobs, and we kept in touch with these mentees. And after a couple of years, the feedback that we got from them is there isn't a young professional community in St. Louis. If you didn't go to high school here, you don't know where to go as far as who you're going to make friends with and all that routine. So in collaboration with those former mentees, we actually formed what's called the Young Professionals Network. And so all of our mentees coming out of the program are invited to join the Young Professionals Network after they have completed their mentorship. And today, that organization in the St. Louis Metro is over 3,500 young professionals, and it is dominated by diversity. So it really, it's something that's already in the picture that doesn't get a lot of notoriety, that we have an opportunity to really leverage in the St. Louis region.
And that's what I've learned about living here. I'm not from here either, which means I didn't go to high school here either. Yeah. But what I've learned is to recruit here, sometimes we have to pull out some different methods. I came here, I'm from New York City, but I came here from Orange County, California. And I came here to work at the St. Louis Regional Chamber as the Chief Operating Officer. And one of the things that when I got my offer letter that I thought was really unique, my offer letter was 3 pages long, but it started out saying, "You are the right leader at the right time." And I just see all these different themes of different methods and tools that we're using to bring people here to the region. And to your point around a sense of community, I think that, we can say sometimes we do struggle with that. And even with myself being an African-American woman moving here, one of the things that my boss did, that I thought was amazing, and was in my offer letter, they offered to actually host 2 welcome receptions for me. And one was hosted by, you all would know, David Stewart and his wife from Worldwide Technologies, and another couple. And what was really interesting about that, there were like 150 people that came. And because I was at the chamber, there were leaders that I'm sure many of which are at RBC as well, CEOs. And it really helped to accelerate my ability to get to know people in the region, even though I wasn't from here. So I say that because the theme that I'm hearing is that there are extra levers sometimes that we need to pull because of some of the challenges that outsiders hear about our region. So thank you for that. Now I'd like to come to Norma. Norma, as the Associate Vice Chancellor responsible for career development, there's quite a bit that your office knows in terms of global research that can actually supplement the research that was spoken about this morning. I'd like to hear about how your office is using that research to assist employers in recruiting our students.
Yeah, thank you. Happy to be here, and I too am not from St. Louis, and so I have many of the same observations that the research actually kind of shone a light on. I'm gonna just take a step back, and the Center for Career Engagement sits within Student Affairs, and within Student Affairs, we really look at the development of the whole student. It is critical as we engage with our new student population and quite frankly with our families who send their students here because they come from across the globe, that we do something intentional to expose them to the St. Louis market. And so we have a program during orientation called In the Lou. In the Lou exposes, we actually take students out into the city. We engage with Del Mar Divine and with other initiatives, of course, with the Cardinals and with City and with our Blues, and take them out so that they see the ways that they can engage as young students and professionals in our community. And that is an ongoing process. In fact, when we have family weekend coming up next month, we will take them out again into the city so that they see all of the benefits that St. Louis has for engagement and growth. In looking at kind of holistically at the research, and what we know is that it is critical for employers to start recruiting early. We call it early engagement. And when I say early engagement, there are some very astute organizations who are reaching out to even our K through 12. We really want to engage our employers as soon as our first-year students arrive. We have, like Joe mentioned, the RBC mentoring program. We have a WashU-based mentoring program called WashU Connects. If you are not part of WashU Connects as a member of the organization of St. Louis, I invite you to join. Our students, we invite them from first year on through their whole academic career to engage with you however you'd like to engage with them. Some employers might have coffee. Some might say, come shadow for a week or a day. But that is one way. You know, if students don't have an opportunity to experience, they won't know. So that early engagement is critical. We also are a huge fan of internships. Internships, they're beginning earlier and earlier and in addition to overarching experiential learning. It might be a project that you have and you want some student insight or input. We have mechanisms in place through the Center for Career Engagement and through many of our schools for you to engage with faculty on specific research. You just saw a great example this morning. So how you show up and provide opportunity to our students is critical. We also have taken an approach in our new model here. So our Center for Career Engagement serves all of campus. So for those of you who might have been familiar in the past, even 2 years back, we had multiple career centers here at WashU. We now have one entry point for you. So any way you want to engage, we will connect you with our employer engagement team for strategy sessions, individual sessions to help you figure out the best way to recruit the right people to connect you with across campus. Our students are interdisciplinary, which if you look at the research and what employers are looking for in talent today, it is not in one lane. We really are looking for broad-based talent that shows up around their ability to demonstrate teamwork, their ability to demonstrate effective communication skills, as well as, of course, those analytical and critical thinking. Our students have it. So I invite you to engage with us so you can see for yourself the benefit of the WashU talent.
And I underscore what Norma has shared, because being that I am a professor here, I would like to share, and I believe that you take advantage of this as well. It's kind of stretching yourself as an employer in this region. So I won't name the company, but there's an employer who asked, I teach a class called Leading Across Differences, and an employer asked, could they have a live case study as part of my course? And they did that, and it worked out very well. So they came in during the midterm, introduced themselves to the students, and the assignment I gave the students was actually a final to actually answer this case question on behalf of the employer. And the employer also, in between the end of the semester and mid-semester, held office hours to be able to answer questions that students may have, any additional questions. And then the employee resource group that actually led the question that the employer asked, they actually came to judge the final exam, so to speak. And then those students had the opportunity to top 3 teams to actually go to a employee resource group all-day conference, happens to be on disability, where they're going to have the opportunity to rub elbows, not with just this particular employer, but other employers that this employer invites, So I share that just to say that as employers, I know there are a number of you out here in the audience, just think about what it is that you can do differently to really grab the minds and hearts, of our students. Thank you for that. Tom, the question that I have for you relates to, and this is really near and dear to my heart because when I came here, I worked at an organization that did economic development for the region. So I had an opportunity to study other cities like ours in the Midwest. So when you look at other cities such as Columbus, Indianapolis, Cincinnati, for example, one of the things that I see as a continuous theme is these cities actually have strategic plans. And those strategic plans include stakeholders that are private industry, government, higher education, small business. And in so doing, they've had success. So one of the questions that I wanted to ask you when you think about the research and when you think about those types of collaborations, what is it that we in our region could do to actually up-level our ability to be attractive to both employer and employee?
Well, firstly, thank you for having me. How many of the folks in the audience have attended this event before? Not many. Well, that's too bad. This is a great event. And like Joe, I did watch the debate, so I'm going to do a follow-up and then I'll answer the question. Last time I was here, I talked about a program that Schnucks was developing, which is an accelerator program for minority-owned businesses. And the notion was to help them build the operating model and strategic plans, and then select the best of, let's say, however many applicants, and then give them seed money, and then ultimately allow them to provide goods to Schnucks. We did launch the program and awarded our first scholarships around 2 weeks ago. So that's the follow-up to that discussion. And I would love to take the applause, but a lady named Adrienne Moore was really the person that headed that. But to answer the question, and again, I'm a hard line left brain thinker, so I think process oriented probably. The way I approach strategy is, I think we need to establish our desired goal state, right? Do self-assessment, and then build the bridge between the two, where you are now and where you want to be. So it's very important for us to have a plan and have academia, business, NGOs, and government come together and say, this is our vision for this region, and these are the hard deliverables that we want to hit. We want a certain level of job growth. We want to attract a certain number of businesses. We want to improve our infrastructure by X. We want to upskill the talent within St. Louis and put metrics around that. And then once we kind of establish that, then step back. And this is an interesting exercise because I thought about this week. I use SWOT, a SWOT analysis. I don't know if you're familiar with the tool, but it's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And I use this as part of our performance planning cycle. I ask my teammates to give me a SWOT, and I'll do that as part of the process to make sure that we have a very candid and constructive conversation. So if I think about a SWOT for our region, what are the strengths of St. Louis? We've got an amazing heritage. We're a very competitive people. We have really great industry here. We've got great, ag tech, great healthcare, aerospace, an emerging innovation and IT industry. And I'm sure I'm missing some.
We have Forest Park.
Yeah, and then, we do have Forest Park, but we also have a low cost of living.
We do.
And it was brought out in the study. So we have these amazing strengths. So how do we use them or lean into them to really address some of the problems that would be in the threats, weaknesses, and opportunities? So I think our weaknesses, and Joe mentioned it, crime. A lot of it's reputation. And as C2 said, it's, you know, maybe not fair, but it's up to us to change the brand, right? The other is an aging infrastructure. You go to these cities that you just named, when you drive through their cities, you can tell they've invested in the infrastructure. But our opportunities are big too. We just talked about having an amazing community of universities, right? And so, you know, that plus I think with Cortex and the startup scene, there are opportunities that abound, and then our threats are probably more along the lines of reputational and honestly population growth. Because if you compare our population growth numbers to those cities, specifically Columbus, I think they double our growth, right? So if that's our present state, and this is where we want to be, then it's up to us to build a roadmap. And it's not a one-year exercise. We've got to be committed as an entire community across, you know, industry, education, obviously NGOs and government, to see this out. And the best example I've seen of a plan that we're getting behind, and honestly, when I prepared for this presentation or this panel, I was really focused on the panel. I didn't know Jason Hall was coming after me. But Jason came and spoke to the executive team at Schnucks. And they have a North Star that is inclusive growth. Did I get that right? And they have organized groups of individuals to go and work on and attack each of those areas that I just talked about. There's a group focused on infrastructure, safety, building greenways, safe greenways, maybe even attracting younger talent with some of the interesting type coffee shops, corner parks, places to build relationship, right? There's a group focused on innovation. There is this idea of creating these clusters of industry talent, you know, centered around ag tech, centered around geospatial. We've got the great geospatial organization here, healthcare technology, and so on. And then kind of connecting them so that they're sharing individuals. And honestly, that would elevate the salaries and things of that nature. I'm sure I'm forgetting a few things, and obviously Jason's on the next panel, so he'll dive into it deeper, but we have an opportunity. I came into this, as I said, I spoke a couple of events ago. I didn't have half the optimism that I have right now. I think we have a plan. I think we can get behind that plan and we can revitalize this area. Final point I'd make, and I took a note during your presentation, C2 and Michael, is one of the things that is most important to individuals in their jobs, you know, once they get beyond the I need to make so much money and this and that and the other, is they need inspired work, right? It doesn't matter how much you make if your job sucks, right? That's just true. And what I would say is, for this region, we need to be advocates and ambassadors for the good that's going on in this region, so that we inspire not just students to stay, we attract a talent from the outside, because we want them to come be a part of this great thing that's occurring in our region and give them reason to do so.
I thank you for that, Tom. And I totally agree that we're not going to get to where he's speaking of or where these other cities have gotten to by acting individualistic. It's really going to take collaborations between all the stakeholders that you mentioned to actually make a difference. So now I'm going to actually transition to Q&A. Who has questions for these amazing panelists that we have here this morning in regard to the impact of talent in our ecosystem?
Hey, hello, thanks for being here and being on the panel. This is a question for Tom. You know, with Schnook Markets, you have a strong program with helping people with special needs. Can you talk more about how you came up, I know not personally, but how Schnucks came up with that, how it works, and what we can learn from that?
Yeah, yeah, I should divulge, and maybe this is not the place for it, but I'll do it anyway. I have two sons with special needs, so it's near and dear to my heart. But what we do have at Schnucks is a very rich program about diversity, equity, and inclusion, but it's a little bit different. We want to create generational wealth and opportunity, right? So we do have a program and a person, I just mentioned Adrian Moore, that is focused on the making sure that the supply chain has representation from each of those groups, and it's veterans, it is people with disabilities, it's underserved communities, and so on. But within the organization, we also have employee groups. I actually chair the one called ABLE, where we focus on creating a greater experience and attraction to Schnucks for people with disabilities. And you'll see them in our stores. They're some of the most energetic, productive, and delightful individuals. I wish I could be as delightful as some of these individuals are, but that's really kind of the foundation. Is, you know, one of our, you know, everybody has the kind of your culture statements, right? One is Midwest family values, right? Helping people in need, nourishing people's lives. And that's, you know, that's just an extension of who we are, that program. Mm-hmm.
Yes, my question is for Melissa. You mentioned earlier in your presentation that, or in your portion, that you were creating a hybrid environment that was attractive to IT and e-commerce professionals. As someone in the private employer sector who has seen a drive to work from home, what are some of the examples of things that you did to make the New Balance office more attractive and a more welcoming environment for folks who, at least in my experience, maybe prefer to work from home almost exclusively?
Yeah. And that is a true statement. I think, you know, we certainly have a hybrid policy, so that helps, where we come into the office 3 days a week. But I think what we wanted to create in our space is something that really encourages collaboration, and really engages associates in the brand. Software engineers in particular are not ones that are sitting in meetings very often. And so we want to make sure though that where they are, they're able to work effectively in their cohorts. We're an agile-centric organization, so they work together in pods in their area. And we also have a lot of conference rooms set up for, you know, hybrid communication, because we are a global company. So a lot of our technical talent are communicating with associates all over the world. And then at that, you know, we want to lean into the brand. We have a track that goes all the way around our building. So when, you know, we actually bring recruits and talent in, that's one of the things that really stands out, is that, you know, you can be in the space, you can walk the space, and we really prioritize that movement. And, you know, it's full of our brand. It's like walking into a New Balance store. And so I think we really want to lean into the strength of our brand, but then we also want to lean into the strength of our values. And associates love to get together, and they certainly love to get together and help within the community. We host a lot of events internally where we'll go to the food bank, for example, and do volunteer days. And I think it's those kinds of interactions that are really helping our associates feel a part not only of the brand of New Balance, but a part of a local community of colleagues that are in this e-commerce and technology profession.
I have a question. My name is Michael Whitley. Thank you all for the comments, such great commentary, data, and analytics. I'm from St. Louis, and I had to move away to Atlanta and Chicago to come back to St. Louis for what I would say would be pay equity. Sometimes being from St. Louis, it seems insular with the whole "what high school did you go to" thing. I've heard this from people that are not from here and they move here, and if you didn't go to high school here, you kind of don't fit in. But I'm from here and I still feel like I didn't fit in. So my question is to any of the panelists: how do we change the perception and the perceived awareness of our community as we build and as we have the infrastructure that's going on. But the perception that was given earlier from data and analytics is if the salary is high, that's great. Cost of living is competitive, but there's still a perception that's a misnomer of perceived value, either being from St. Louis and you fit in, or you're an outsider and you don't fit in. So how do you overcome that piece?
Yeah. I can maybe address that just from how we work with our students to educate them. And, I had a real interesting reaction to the research that Michael and Sithu worked with the students on, because they focused on the Austin market, which is where I came from. And I know that market inside and out compared to St. Louis, and the perceptions, because some of them the students perceive what Austin looks like as opposed to St. Louis. And there were some areas where I just disagreed. I know what the cost of living is like in Austin. It is not moderate. But the perception, right? And what they want to see now, the young professional life, or the night vibes, or whatever they called it, absolutely, they've got that nailed, right? So really it's on us to help educate our early talent on how to negotiate these factors that weigh into and it's not just about salary. It's the entire compensation package. It's the other things that we know early talent and our new professionals care about. Flexibility. We know they care about their values matching the values of the organizations here. So I think there's a little bit of a disconnect on both sides. So on our part, in preparing our students, that's one of the ways that we are approaching through education and helping them to better negotiate their value and their staying power, provided that their values align, that they are appropriately compensated, and there's always room for negotiation there, right? And so it's putting those tools into practice to help our early talent see that.
And with
Can
that,
can
I
add
hate to do
something
this.
that?
I hate to do this to you, but we're actually at time. We only have, we have a 10-minute break before the next session. I just want to give the opportunity for the audience to take a break. So I apologize. I want to say thank you. I want to say to Michael, thank you for your question. I think that is one of the secret sauce questions that we need a secret sauce answer to, in terms of how do people fit and feel they belong within this region. So with that, I just want to say thank you all for staying, coming up close for session 1. We are going to offer you a 10-minute break, so we ask that you be back here at 10:30 for session number 2. Thank you so much, and thank you to our panel. Is it the start for me to take a picture?
Stay on time. And as I mentioned, when Situ and I are presenting, really the real magic of today is really from our panel discussions and the closing remarks that are going to be made by Dean Mazzio. And just that first session just inspired so many creative ideas on things that we can do, and really just reinforced how important it is for us to put strategic focus on attracting and retaining talent. And there were aspects of that discussion that were centered on investment. And so it's a natural progression to where we're going to go now. And I'm excited to turn it over to Lisa Weingarth in our panel 2 discussion, which is really going to be centered on that. How do we think about using this information to make more intelligent investments in our community, to generate those near, mid, and long-term returns that we all are collectively seeking? So Lisa, when you're ready, I'll turn it over to you and we'll get panel 2 discussion underway. All right.
Test, test.
Yeah.
Now it's on, yeah. Hi, what a great crowd. So excited to see so many familiar faces here, some new faces to talk about this important challenge for our region and opportunity. And I just wanted to thank Michael Wall and C2 again for the opportunity to work on this research together and to bring people together to share what we learned. And I encourage you to reach out to Michael or C2 if you ever want to work on a research question. They're fantastic to work with. And also wanted to thank Dean Mazzio for his commitment to be in St. Louis for St. Louis at Olin Business School and to provide this opportunity for our community to get together and talk about important topics. My name is Lisa Weingarth. I'm Senior Advisor for St. Louis Initiatives in the Office of the Chancellor. And in my role, I get to collaborate with leaders across the university to think about how we can deepen the university's role and impact in St. Louis. We have a great panel here today. Subhash Elias, who is the CEO of the Missouri Partnership, Sean Armstrong, Dean of Continuing and Professional Studies at WashU, not Olin. We have Maxine Clark, my friend and Chief Inspirator of the Delmar Divine, founder of the Build-A-Bear Workshop, and then finally Sam Fiorello, CEO of Cortex. And we're going to talk about shaping and strategic investments to fuel our ecosystem, our talent ecosystem here in St. Louis. And so to start, I have a question for you, Subhash. As CEO of the Missouri Partnership, you are one of the greatest cheerleaders for Missouri. You're selling St. Louis, you're selling Missouri all over the country. And for that reason, you've seen, you're attracting businesses to our state and to our community. And so you've seen firsthand how strategic investments can transform regions and foster growth. How might Missouri Partnership and others focused on relocation and attraction use what we learned today to help St. Louis stay competitive? And how can we ensure that these investments are aligned with the needs for our current and our future workforce?
So Lisa, thank you for having me. And let me, since I have the floor, I also want to reiterate what you said. Thank you to you with the WashU in St. Louis for St. Louis. It's obviously a global institution, and kind of having, looking out for your own community in your own backyard is really commendable. So I really appreciate your work with this and the university for that too. It's excellent. And the Olin team on this study, just excellent work, really insightful. I read the study and even more enthralled by the presentation, so very well done. I think it's a stepping stone to something really exciting here. So everything we do is really with this business attraction lens, attracting companies to the state. And so one thing I can assure you is we can attract all kinds of companies to Missouri if we can demonstrate that we have the talent here. And that's a big if we can demonstrate that we have the talent, because workforce availability is like 1, 2, and 3 when it comes to determining where to locate a facility. So these site selection factors and location decision factors, they want to know, can they find the right people with the right skills at the right cost and the right quantities? And it's not just who is there today, but who's there tomorrow. So who's in the pipeline coming in after who's already here now? And so, these are 10, 20, 30-year decisions that these companies are making, and they want to mitigate risk. And so one of the biggest risk factors that they would have is spending $300, $400 million in a facility and then not having the talent to work there. And so we know that we are regularly being looked at. I can tell you right now, we're being evaluated for many opportunities. We sourced around 55 opportunities in fiscal 24 that we know of. And we know it's probably 10x that where companies are looking at Missouri and other states. But we have to be able to be on their radar and show that we've got the talent. And so what that takes is kind of this infrastructure that we've talked about today, the infrastructure of institutions, the talent pipeline, and the companies knowing about the talent pipeline, And so I believe we have that. The good news is we have it. Where we struggle is the feeder into that talent pipeline. We have so many incredible opportunities in this region and in this state for employees to take positions, but we've got this skills mismatch happening. And so what can we do about that particular skills mismatch? So essentially, we've got to increase the awareness of the opportunities, have people look at different career paths, and we have all of those institutions here. One comment that a gentleman, he was sitting over there, I don't know where he is now, but asked the question earlier today about the talent cost, or what the salary would be. When we're working with companies, they're evaluating location, business climate, workforce, infrastructure, soft infrastructure, quality of life, multiple factors that they're looking at. That is a company making a very sophisticated decision, and they still don't always do it right. And imagine the scenario that was pointed out about, is somebody just looking straight at salary? There is so much more beyond it, and I know that we've got a role in that. So I'm really excited about the study. I think we have all of the ingredients. I think we got to tie it together a little bit. And this study is the stepping stone, what I hope is to come.
Thank you so much. Sam, you're next. As CEO of Cortex, you commissioned the first of these research projects a couple of years ago to support business relocation efforts, not just for Cortex, but for our entire region. You've overseen Cortex's impressive growth and as an innovation hub for our region. Based on your experience, what investments have been most impactful in driving innovation ecosystems, and how can St. Louis build on its strengths to attract even more companies and talent to our region?
Yeah, thanks for having me, and thanks to the group from CABI for doing the great work that they do, and thrilled to continue to piggyback on the work that we did. Subesh mentioned it, and that was mentioned earlier, that the coin of the realm, especially in a tech economy, is talent. And when we're recruiting employers to say, come to St. Louis, put down stakes and grow your company, of course they think, well, I need lab space, but the thing that they ask first, second, and third is, can I get the talent that I need? And we have to be able to answer with a full-throated yes. And the good news is we have been able to do that. Today, Cortex employs, there's more than 6,000 people in the Cortex district, 425 companies. Early investments 22 years ago by some visionary leaders and institutions like Washington University and St. Louis University, NUMSL, and BJC made some investments. But to keep that going and to continue to push for that inclusive economic growth that's at the core of what we do, we're going to need to have a talent pipeline. 3 buckets of talent. We need to make sure that we can tap into the folks, the graduates of Washington University, the best and the brightest that come from hundreds of miles away. We need to convince more of them to stay here and give them a reason to do that. We need to figure out a way to better upskill local, untapped, underutilized talent. And we've been working on that in partnership for the last couple of years. We need to make sure that there is an environment there people have a fuller life than just work, but it was mentioned earlier about people care about the quality of life and things like, Austin's brand of Keep Austin Weird. So we need to have things like supporting the arts and communities and infrastructure. But one of the things that I've really found is that, especially with a cohort that's younger, early 20s, earlier career, I've got a 30-year-old and a 28-year-old, and they, of course, want to have a competitive salary, but they really also want to have some sort of purpose-driven work. They need to feel part of a community, and it's incumbent on us to figure out ways to pull them into the community. Norma mentioned that WashU does that with incoming class, but Cortex really thinks about that. One of the things that we offer in partnership with one of our tenants called Filament is every year we have something called Thanksgiving. And Thanksgiving is we go out and we find not-for-profits in our community. Last year was 75 of them. I think we're going to shoot for 80. And we say to those not-for-profits, what's a problem that can be hacked and solved? And it can't be write a check and give us money. It's a problem that you have that you think a bunch of smart problem solvers can fix for you. We take those problems, and then we also go in the community. We put together a team of problem solvers. And these problem solvers are companies like Schnucks and others will bring a team of 4 or 5 people. I think we need to do a better job getting some WashU and SLU and UMSL students on those teams. And in 6 weeks, they work with that not-for-profit and they'll hack a solution. And what's really terrific and what we've learned in the 4 years of doing this is, yes, the not-for-profit gets a solution. Like they'll move from an app that's kind of a basic binary app, do we have food at this pantry or not, to really making it much more robust and there's produce here. But the findings is, especially for the younger cohorts on those teams, is a connection to St. Louis, a connection to that not-for-profit. That then goes on. 80% of the folks who have worked with a not-for-profit in a Thanksgiving continue then to work with that not-for-profit. And there's a sense of enrichment, of fulfillment, and connection. I think the better we can do at that, the higher the chance it will get some of these young men and women to say, I want to build my career and my life here.
Thank you. And I think that's true. When I speak to students here at WashU, I always say, you know, St. Louis is a community where you really can make a difference, where you can have an impact. And we've seen that students that do engage here in St. Louis during their time at WashU do tend to stay here, at least for that first job, which is a great step towards keeping more talent here in St. Louis. And I think this is a great transition to Maxine. You know, as everyone knows about your success with Build-A-Bear, of course, where you turned your vision into a global brand. Less known, maybe, is your leadership in St. Louis and including your work with the Del Mar Divine. While with your experience in both entrepreneurship and community development, what advice do you have to ensure that investments in innovation also benefit the broader community?
Thank you, Lisa, for that question. And thank you for putting on this program. This is really fantastic to see everybody here. I think one thing when we talk about pipeline, we don't talk about kids in high school as the pipeline. We have tremendous talent here in St. Louis, all over St. Louis, and every single school, even if it's a school that you think is as far north or as far east as the river, we have children that are excelling in their programs, and they are going off to some of the best universities in the country, as well as sometimes here at Washington University. But I heard somebody in the last session ask the question about, well, I'm from St. Louis and I wanted a job here in St. Louis and I couldn't get the kind of pay that I wanted to get. So I went someplace else and finally I'm back. Well, sometimes they come back, but most of the time they don't because they're finding opportunities in other cities. Like I came here, I was transferred here by the May department stores in the mid-70s. I thought I was going to be here for a couple of years, and here I am because the community provided so much opportunity to me. So I do believe that our high school students really need to know what's going on in St. Louis. We skip a stage. We let them go off to college, and then we want to try to recruit them. The other is that we really do need to get to know these young people. That we have. I would encourage every company to think about summer internships for college students that do go away and are also here at St. Louis. We have tremendous programs. The Scandalaris summer program has, I don't know, almost 200 young people here every summer, or last summer anyway. And we saw them at Del Mar Divine, and they have so much interest in our community. And that's my job. I like try to, snag them into St. Louis and take them out to dinner or lunch and kind of get them to know what is it that they really like. Like I met a student who was a musician, and I said, have you been to Jazz at the Bistro? Have you been to jazz? Every Wednesday night they have a jazz jam in Grand Center. No, I've never been, and now they go there. So there's a connection if you talk to people, and I love doing that. That's kind of the teddy bear part of me, is that hug that you have to give a person. But we have a high school here, a private high school, Cardinal Riddle High School. 100% of the students go to college. They go to WashU, they go to SLU, they go to Georgia Tech, they go to Emory, they go all over the place. And they actually do want to come back to St. Louis. I've talked to them, but they can't, when they come back on that first Christmas break and they try to get a summer job, they told me that people tell me there's not we're not ready for interns yet. And when they come back in March, they say, we already hired the interns. We have to do a better job at this. I think it's a huge opportunity to lasso in those young people that really have the brain power, and they're going off to get more brain power. Why aren't we getting it back here? And I think that that's a huge opportunity for us. The other is the ecosystem of entrepreneurship and business that we do have here, which is incredible, is that more of us need to be willing to nurture those young people that are starting out in a business, whether they're here at WashU or SLU, thinking of a business idea, or they just graduated. They need experience. They need people with experience. And we need to be able to free up some time in our schedules to encourage that, to give them the advice. Doesn't mean they're going to take it, but at least we have it and we can share it. And I think it also gives a whole lot more back to us because you get to know that consumer demographic, you get to know what they're thinking, what they're trying to create, and also directing them to opportunities here in St. Louis that they would not otherwise have. Just that connection. It's not so much yet even about investment, dollars of investment, although that will eventually come, I'm sure, is really who can you introduce me to that might be able to connect me to the right person at Schnucks or the right person at Cortex, and most of us know those people. So that's really a simple ask. And I think it takes like 5 minutes. It's a 5 minute, it's something 5 minutes you can do that can really help somebody get to the next level. And rarely does it take much more than that, but sometimes. But I would say it's really, really rewarding and we should do more of it. More formal and more informal.
Thank you, Maxine. You are one of the best, the great connectors in St. Louis, and I know you always take the time to make that connection. So thank you for everything that you do. Sean, glad to have you here.
Thank you.
You're Dean of our newly imagined School of Continuing and Professional Studies here at WashU. And under your leadership, the school has developed innovative new programs that are targeted towards meeting needs right here in St. Louis. One program is the Empower program, which is a free program focused on reskilling and upskilling refugees here in St. Louis for opportunities that are within our workforce. So given your experience, what strategic investments do you believe are crucial to unlocking the untapped potential in our region, and particularly when it comes to reskilling and upskilling?
Thank you. Slight tangent. There are 9 schools at WashU. CAPS is the 8th and School of Public Health is the 9th.
There
So
you
I just
go.
wanted our friends
Yeah.
to know that for
Thank you.
sure. Also, we are pleased with the Empower program. We are happy to be able to develop a program that addresses the workforce needs for new Americans here. Wanted to say that, and Katie Brown was here earlier, but she had to leave, but I wanted to make sure I gave her a shout out for that. The strategic investment we need to make is an action, and I think it's an action actions that can scale. There are a lot of great ideas, a lot of great programs in the St. Louis area. And I think if we were to make some investments, even alignments, and you'll hear probably a lot of us say the same things, but if we can align on many of those programs, I think we're able to scale that program to a great degree of success. St. Louis has talent. They have a great deal of talent here. And there can be a great pipeline to opportunities. I think the action we need to take is to close the gap between the individual talent and the opportunities that we have, especially the employment opportunities that we have. There was an article yesterday in the New York Times. Ted Mitchell, he's the president of the Association the American Council on Education. He wrote an article to the presidential candidates, our presidential candidates, and in that article, he said, higher education builds America. And they build it through workforce, they build it through the economy, through ideas, and through innovation. And what I wanted to mention, it's a plug for CAPS, of course, but WashU has made a capital investment through the School of Continuing and Professional Studies to help to build the talent pipeline in St. Louis. So, WashU has been here for years, right? So we've been present. Now we're present, we're engaged, right? And we want to partner with individuals on actions that we can scale. And to me, that's what it means to be in St. Louis for St. Louis. Plug for Lisa.
Thank you. And plug for CAPS. Thank you for sharing more about
Absolutely.
what you're doing in your vision. A question for the whole panel. What are some key strategic investments that you would love to see made in St. Louis over the next 2 to 3 years to contribute to bolstering our talent ecosystem?
I'll go first.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
I do think this idea of maybe a more orchestrated program that really brings our students that leave us to go away to college, and WashU students and SLU students and Webster students, that we develop some kind of matching program where we can hire them in the summertime and connect them to something that their purpose. Because if they start as freshmen into the sophomore year, they can have a couple of experiences before they really decide what it is they want to do. And I'm finding that the young people that I meet, even at WashU, they discover something really incredible on their way to another class, and they take that up as a minor. think about how many opportunities there are for us to expose young people to what those opportunities are in their community. And if we thought about it in a more orchestrated way, we could actually think about one of for lack of a better word, a tour, that we would actually take the young people in that program around to many different places while they were here in the summer to see the geospatial, to see different companies, to see Cortex. What's out here? They have no idea. And when I moved to St. Louis, I said that I planned to stay here for 2 years. And I couldn't leave because there was so much opportunity here. And what I'm going to say it again, you said it first, but St. Louis is small enough that if you just call somebody on this panel and say, gee, I want to get involved in X, Y, or Z, we will get you there. And it's big enough when you do something, it's going to really matter. It actually will make the headlines. And I think that that's something that we really don't play up enough, is that all of us know each other and we all can connect you to whatever it is that you're looking for. It may not turn out to be the job of your dreams, but it's a way towards that job of your dreams. And I think that those opportunities are really out here, but we might need to orchestrate it a little bit more in a more sophisticated and way so that kids know where to call, where to go. School principals would know alumni associations would know how to reach us, and then we could pull it together in a major impact for our community.
Lisa, I'll reiterate what Sean said. We have the infrastructure in place. It really is about scaling. We have countless examples of a handful of students that have gone into some of the high-tech industries here, but we need hundreds, we need thousands, tens of thousands of students to do it and take advantage of it, because we can be absolutely transformational if we do that. So I think again, we have the ingredients. We need to tie it all together, a very robust talent attraction, retention, and feeder program.
I think we need to expand our definition of talent. We're talking a lot about students, which makes sense. We're at this fine institution. But for a place like Cortex and for our community, we need to think about investors. So I met a few weeks ago a guy named Vic, who I saw earlier, might be in the crowd. There he is. Vic is from San Francisco and ran a venture capital fund. He's moved here. His wife is from here, which is I'm a trailing spouse too, Vic. So we should have a saying. There's so many of us, it should be in St. Louis, not from St. Louis. So there are the Vics out there with his steakhouse ventures. There are folks who are principal investigators at WashU Medical School who are really, really good at discovery, but may have think, can I start a company? And that's a kind of talent that needs investment. And on a whole range of things, because we need all of them. And especially a place like Cortex, which relies so heavily on a startup ecosystem, because these startup companies that were once fledgling become the Boeings and the large players that we know today.
And the Build-A-Bears.
The Build-A-Bears that's in a class of its own, Maxine. So anyway, that's what I would encourage us to do. Is there are different kinds of investments and focus, and think about that whole spectrum of talent.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I'd say when you think of WashU, don't just think of our excellent residential students. Also think of our students who are professionals in the industry, or those who are looking to transition from one career to another, or those who, in a partnership, we worked with the St. Louis County Public Library's Excel program. We created a healthcare transition program that brought them from the Excel program through the transition program to opportunities with our own medical school, which takes me to kind of a wish, an aspiring wish that I have for anybody in the room. I'd love to create a commitment to hire program and really talk about what that would mean, and really talking about closing that gap between the talented individual and the opportunity to work in a particular setting. What can we do to make that happen? I'm willing to have that discussion with anybody in the room.
Sounds great. Thanks, Sean. I do want to save some time for questions. We got about 7 minutes left. So if there are any questions from the audience.
Thank you, Bart, for speaking in front of us today. So when we talk about attracting or retaining companies or investors to the area, I would assume that the function is sort of like when we speak about retaining student talent in the city on those non-salary qualities. I wonder, and Subhash or Sam, whichever of you would like to take this question, in your experience, when these investors and companies look at the opportunity of moving and relocating to this area, and they consider talent, they consider the investments in the infrastructure and the facilities that they need to operate here, do you think that the city's sort of infamous struggles with real estate vacancy in the downtown is a sort of negating factor, sort of like when we speak of the students being concerned about the city's reputation on crime? And do companies have an interest in taking up the opportunities that are out there, like the Senate Bill 792, I believe it was, that offers tax credits for redevelopment to give that sense of purpose that we're talking about, to invest in this community and redevelop? Do you see those things? Are they connecting with those investors? Are they connecting with those companies? Do they understand that those opportunities are out there, or do we need to do a better job of pushing those forward?
So I'm happy to address one part of that, and then Sam might be able to address the retention side, so, or the real estate development side. So one thing about what we do is we do one thing, and that's attract companies to the state. And that is a different dynamic than keeping and expanding companies. So what happens is an attraction is a company is looking for, if it's real estate, if you have the opportunity, then you just stay in the mix longer. If you don't have real estate, you're out. We did a report, we did our own report. It's not as robust as the Olin program, but we did a report on why we win and why we lose in Missouri. And we have data from fiscal 16 all the way to 23. And the number one reason had something to do with real estate. But that is just the lens of business attraction. So we're talking about companies that have no ties to the state or this region. And so that's how competitive that becomes. And what happens is they rarely have, I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but they rarely have the wherewithal to do a reinvestment in a facility. That tends to happen more locally than it does from a new company coming in, unless it's a developer that sees the opportunity. But we're targeting the companies that are looking to make a big investment.
I'll say quickly, because I know we're short on time, is when we're recruiting a company to Cortex, they are looking at more than a 200-acre district. They're looking at an entire region. We cannot thrive as a regional economy with a dead core. I don't care if you live in Clayton or Town and Country or Chesterfield, you need to care about a thriving downtown St. Louis, because when I have search committees and teams of CEOs and the C-suite coming, they're not just going to go and stay at the hotel on our 200. They're going to want to see a vibrant core. We have work to do, and I think everyone should care, and not because it's a moral issue, because it's a smart business deal. We need a strong, thriving core to have a strong, vibrant, thriving region. So, thank you.
I think we have time for probably one more question. I think there are a couple here in the front.
Thanks to all of you up on the panel. Very, very enlightening. I appreciate it. My name is Ben Hebbis, and I work for the Rockwood School District. I run a department called Partners in Education. And what we do is we work with kids that are upperclassmen, and we do a lot of job shadowing, and we do a lot of internships, and we actually work with companies throughout the region and bring them into the classroom and have them talk one-on-one with the students. You mentioned the need of talent, and I'm just going to say right now, the talent is there. It blows me away. I wish I had a tenth of these kids' intelligence, because they just are unbelievable. We will have these kids work with companies and universities and do some really cool things during their high school careers. They have great experiences. One of the things that I ask as they finish their internship is, where are you going to go to school? A lot of them say WashU, SLU, that kind of thing. But then I ask them, then what? And there's just too many of them saying they're leaving. They're going to a different state. They're going to a different city, things like that. Maxine, you had some really good things to say. Are there some pointers that you could give me as I'm talking to these kids about how to continue to try to retain them and keep them in St. Louis? They use the resources, they love it here, but at the same time, they just kind of have this vibe of wanting to move on once they maybe leave the university or even high school. What pointers can you guys give me?
Well, we all wanted to move on. I mean, I'm from Miami, Florida. You know, like I wanted to go where there was seasons. I went to Washington DC, I went to University of Georgia, then I went to Washington DC and came to St. Louis, and this is the place that I love. So I do think we have to give kids the opportunity to go away, but we have to keep in touch with them to bring them back. But I do believe, see, I knew about that program a long time ago. I was there talking to some of those kids, but I haven't in a long time. I would love to have them come to Del Mar Divine and really get them to think about their purpose. We talked about that earlier in the conversation. If we can help them see that, I think they'll be back. That's an important connection. And I go back to this all the time because it's like the relationship they have with their teddy bear. And I care so much about these kids because if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't have the resources that I have to invest in this community and all the things that they taught me. So I know that in those heads are a million business ideas that maybe they won't do themselves, but the company that they work for will benefit from that entrepreneurial spirit, that creativity, that curiosity, and we have to encourage it. And we have to try to keep it back. I would love to work with you on this because I think it's one of our greatest assets, our young people. And I want them to go and see the world, but come back and implement here in St. Louis. And this resource, the idea of the real estate, I wasn't a real estate developer. I went to SLDC and bought this piece of property for a really good price. And they helped me. They led me to where I could go to for the financing, and I knew Bob Clark at Clayco to help me build it. But you just have to sort of step out of your comfort zone and say, who do I go to? Who can help me with this? And it doesn't have to be as big as that. They can all be lots of smaller projects that we can all, 1 + 1 + 1. And now you look down Del Mar, and Del Mar is going to be a different street in the next 5 years. And downtown can be a different place in the next. I worked down there for 10 years. I can't believe that it can't be back to what it was, but in the 21st century way, not necessarily the 20th century way.
You know, on this, the question about leaving and coming back, that's an opportunity that we have, and Maxine is absolutely right. I've worked in other regions, and this same dynamic is happening everywhere. It could be the hottest city on the planet, and people still want to leave, but the opportunity could be coming back. And I feel like Missouri and St. Louis does very well on these boomerangs. I'm one myself. I grew up here, left, and came back. The study that Olin did, the difference between the undergrads and the graduates, I was looking at that and determining the things that the levers that they're looking at is different for maybe an older student than an undergrad. And so that's all seems to be apparent in that study too. So there's a great opportunity for people to leave and bring them back.
Well, unfortunately, we are out of time, but I could talk about this topic all day. Thank you to our panelists. We're so grateful for your time and your wisdom today. And thank you all for your great talk.
Really insightful, and this program just keeps building momentum, which is exciting. So we're going to keep momentum going with our last panel. And as the panel makes their way up here, I wanted just to share with you a study that we worked on for a local nonprofit here that was centered on better preparing kids in high school for career opportunities that are not required to have a 4-year degree in. And there were some interesting comments that were made by Maxine and Subhash both. And I wanted to bring that up because when we think about our panel discussion today, we're going to think about maybe potentially some new investments that have occurred here in St. Louis that can create opportunities for everyone in our community. Those where a 4-year college degree maybe doesn't make sense for them, or maybe it's just not possible for them. So really great insights. And I'm excited to turn it over to Peter Baumgarten and this remarkable group of panelists to really help us think about everything today as it relates to the research, to then learning about and reinforcing the importance of talent, to investment decisions. How do we actually turn all of this great information and insight into actionable outcomes? And so without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Peter to introduce our panelists, and we'll get started with the final panel before turning it over to Dean Mazzio for closing remarks. Peter?
Check. There we go. I'll yell if I have to, but I prefer not to. You can know it's a well-run conference when they even align things like we are underneath our respective pitchers and the water has been rotated just appropriately. I was trying to say, which water will I drink from, but I don't even have to think like that. One of the things that I'd love to be able to do here during this final session, and really grateful for the foundation that's been laid by all the panelists thus far, is to think about a bit of a buzzword. We talk about this idea of public-private partnerships. We talk about university collaborating with civic leaders, et cetera. But these things are somewhat abstract in many ways. It's at least hard for me to know what they actually mean. And so in many ways, over the last bit of time together, what we're going to dig into is what does this concretely mean from the perspective of three people that sit in this world from slightly different angles. And you're going to hear a lot of overlap. But what I'd love to do as well is to push this not just in terms of what it's like now, but what it'll look like moving forward, or what's even required to have it move forward in an effective way. I won't spend too much time in the introductions, but I'll just briefly highlight a few pieces here. Jason obviously is at Greater St. Louis Inc. You'll hear probably pieces of this in a bit in terms of the collaboration of different, more previously fragmented groups coming together to lead these efforts. With Tony Sardella, we'll have someone who's leading some efforts around the API initiative, and you'll hear about some of that here. He's also a Northwestern MBA grad, which we won't hold against him, but you'll notice I won't ask him any questions today. And then finally, Senator Williams at the very tail end from the 14th District. Also, I believe a board member at my child's daycare. Is that still the case?
I think a board member and a tuition paying,
And a
very
tuition
high
paying.
tuition, very high tuition paying
We-
parent as well.
We will spend most of our time talking about University City Child Care Center. But hopefully we'll cover some of these other pieces. So grateful for the three of you and really all the leadership that you've done along the way. And I want to start with a broad framing on strategy. So it's somewhat easier for us to think about strategy as a single unit. We at Olin are going through a strategic planning process right now. The university went through a strategic planning process a few years back, which led to efforts like this. But when talking about strategy at the level of a city or a region, it's more complicated, it's more fragmented because you have multiple different players, right? We have people here that are strategic players in the city. And so as a result, Jason, I'd love to hear your approach on how a strategy is formed. And just to get you thinking about this, I was in DC yesterday with our dean, Mike Mazzio, and over dinner, we were having a conversation talking about how cities have to build upon their unique assets and capabilities. So in other words, the strategy that Baltimore takes is going to be different than the strategy that Detroit takes or Chicago takes. And so, Jason, as you think about the work that you have been a part of and coming together as a less fragmented unit and paying attention to the capabilities of the region, how has the strategic process taken form out of that process?
Yeah, no, happy to. And one, thank you. And it's great to be with everyone today. Look forward to this dialogue. Thank you to Washington University for the tremendous leadership. It is good to see data informing these big decisions we need to make. They have big, big consequences on the trajectory of the region. So I think to be living the values of in St. Louis for St. Louis is a great, great example when you have one of the world's best universities to harness, not just write a check, but actually put the human talent behind it. And second to that, because she was on the last panel, a big thanks to Lisa Weingarth, who stepped into new shoes, a new role. She's one of the most humble leaders, but who our team works with every day, who gets up every day trying to do the right thing rather than protect turf. And that represents cultural change for this region. And I am thankful that Chancellor Martin put her in that role and how she lives it. So let me, to talk about the plan and strategy, let me just be a lawyer for a minute since I am. A little bit of context. One, we're talking about talent, and there's been a lot of talk about interventions and things we could do, should do. Bigger arc of history, just so we're all oriented in space and time. The lesson of the bigger arc of history is that human capital flows to places that are good places to live, and they are full of opportunity. That is ultimately what happens. So as a region, you need to fulfill that basic mandate. And if you're going to try to shape it, and you can, and we've heard examples, Columbus, Indianapolis, great examples of doing that, you have to do it at scale. You cannot do subscale efforts and drive transformative change. So it's just a framing point on it. Two, there was talk in the first panel, and since Tom Henry, the chief data scientist at Schnucks, called this out, let's start with facts, and we will put that on there. From a talent population perspective and economic opportunity perspective, the hard reality for this region is we are coming off of 2 decades of flat growth. It is not sustainable. And when we entered this decade at the start of the pandemic, we were on a course as a metro to fall from the 20th largest metro to the 30th this decade without an intervention at scale. Those are the hard realities. So when we talk about that, let's just keep that in mind, because that was the inspiration to shift trajectory. GSL is a response from the business community to say what we were doing is not working. And when we talk about Columbus and Indianapolis, organized completely differently, the business community was as fragmented as government and didn't need a vote of the people to change, just needed the will and the courage and the vision. And thankfully, Andy Taylor, a great citizen of St. Louis, great philanthropist in St. Louis, stepped in to that and helped unite us. It's the last thing the business community needs is more lines. If this is what best in class looks like for St. Louis, and this is what's going to make a difference, let's build a big inclusive tent and set a new direction in the middle of the pandemic and move forward. And we'll come back to that. And finally, I will leave you with this. We developed, so there was a question, and I think Tom had it, is there a plan? As all ambassadors for St. Louis, the most important thing we can do is stop perpetuating false myths that things don't exist that do. Part of our challenge in the region is gear shifting. You have to shape an economy, to shape where talent wants to be, you have to stay the course. It is nonlinear, it will be stochastic at times, but you have to drive the course and stick with it for a decade. And that has been a challenge. The region did not have a written down plan for over a decade of how we were going to grow, how we were going to attract talent. So shaping that plan was a big community process. In the middle of a pandemic, we brought in Bruce Katz, formerly of Brookings, one of the best sort of practical people that works on regional economies globally, to say, let's shape it. And it was really a big therapy session with the region to understand what are our strengths and looking at data, but we were attracting gala-sized audiences to come in and provide their hopes and dreams for what they wanted the region to have. The last time we had done that, the Danforth family had led the St. Louis 2004, a big cross-sector, big push that created a lot of things we talk about today, like Cortex and Great Rivers Greenway, and lots of great things came from that, that shifted the trajectory of the region. We hadn't done that for over a decade. That is unlike any other top metropolitan region in the United States. So the STL 2030 jobs plan is that plan that the business community is stewarding in partnership with so many other partners throughout the region that choose collaboration as the pathway forward. In those first 4 years, we know that was a massive intervention for a region that was the 47th slowest growing out of the top 50 in the last decade. Today, we are the 16th fastest growing metro in the United States, outpacing our population rank for the first time in decades. We are a top 5 metro for job creation for the first time since 1990. We are the largest metropolitan region for year-over-year growth in the foreign-born. And man, if you want to follow a talent pipeline that knows how to sniff out opportunity as the early warning signal, go where immigrants and refugees are flocking, and they are flocking to St. Louis, #1 in the country with 23% year-over-year growth. Betsy Cohen's been shepherding this for 10 years. Thank you, Betsy. And I could go on and on. This is something dramatically different. This intervention is producing different results. There will be people that do not want this braiding of inclusion and growth to survive. That is a threat to the work. I think this represents a new direction for this region, a new direction for this country. And I do believe in the post-pandemic world where everything has been shaken up. And San Francisco is now the poster child of dysfunction, which I never thought I would see in my lifetime. I think St. Louis leads the way this decade, and this strategy is where it's going to get us there. And I encourage you to look it up and go grab an oar and let's start rowing in that North Star direction that Tom Henry spoke about.
So Jason, I think you got 3 applauses in this time. That's
not bad for the closing act, right? Thank you. I'm very passionate about this work, as you may say.
Well, I do want to do just one quick follow-up, and then I want to transition over to you, Tony, on this. But yes, there's a need for consistency and consistent focus, coordinated efforts. And at the same point, over the last 4 years, a lot of things have happened. And so how have you all, as a leadership group, balanced the idea of staying consistent in focus, and yet at the same point, evolving and adjusting to things that come your way?
It's we get calls all the time and emails all the time on ideas, and it's good to hear and collect ideas. We have processes of using data and engagement to figure which of those that you act on. And I think we just all need to recognize the world is unusually shaken right now in the post-pandemic era. As I tell our CEOs, we have left the post-World War II era. So every norm, every pecking order of cities, and every sort of image you had about talent in place is on shaky ground. We are on the footsteps of an entirely new era, which is a huge opportunity. And to the disciplined will go the spoils. I think one of the bigger pivots that has happened, and it was mentioned, I think Sam Fiorello, was this region, and it's been a learning curve. Some of us believed it before others, the need to address the urban core. And you're seeing, I think, an unprecedented level of intervention going on right now. We were one of the weakest downtowns going into the pandemic. Of course, the pandemic throws even the strongest downtowns on their heels. There is no pathway to victory, and the cover of the Wall Street Journal on March 14th of this year made it very clear. You can run to Chesterfield, but you cannot hide. The image of this reputation and the magnet for talent is going to get defined by that urban core, whether you like it or not. And so that is a challenge and an opportunity that we all need to own if we want to get to the promised land.
I guess four applauses.
I can keep going. I mean,
So Tony, I want to think now at the level of a particular initiative. So imagine if we've got now this broad regional approach. In many ways, as we just heard from Jason, one of the key factors is that there are opportunities economically for people to step into particular roles. And that builds upon great jobs, novel opportunities. And we can look back to some of the legacy organizations, grateful to have several of them represented here, but it also requires responding to novel opportunities. So I wonder if you can speak maybe acutely to the API initiative, and then whether or not there are some lessons that can be learned from that for some of these other areas that we talk about, whether it's around ag business or other geospatial, which we'll talk about here shortly as well. But
Excellent. Well, first for background, we refer to the API. It's the Active Pharmaceutical Ingredients Innovation Center, the API Innovation Center. Our purpose is to build drug supply chain resiliency for the nation, and in doing that, grow economic prosperity for St. Louis and Missouri. Missouri is well positioned to address this issue, where 83% of the top 100 medicines that we all take has no US-based supply. And recently, we hit an all-time record for the number of medicines that are in shortage. And so from that perspective, we're focused on bringing that manufacturing through advanced manufacturing capabilities to the United States. And through that advanced manufacturing, it's doing a few things. It's creating new job classes. It's creating new opportunities. And so within our economic impact and recruitment, really setting out what our goal there is. It's not just to create jobs. It's not just to recruit talent, but to be able to recruit and create jobs across all different communities that have never been represented in the pharmaceutical technology industry. And so one of the things that we're finding really effective in this area is by modernizing the advanced technology to manufacture medicines and investing in those technologies here, we're able to open up new opportunities and new job classes. Now, typically, pharmaceutical manufacturing was PhD organic chemists, master's organic chemists. With this modernization of the technology, we're opening it up to certificate programs in quality assurance and quality control. There's a huge untapped opportunity of talent locally in St. Louis that we could bring to bear by offering these different capabilities and jobs there. Just give you a context of the magnitude. We're very delighted. 2 weeks ago, President Biden and Vice President Harris announced the first time ever award under the Defense Production Act for the production of medicines, and that award was to St. Louis's API Innovation Center. We're blessed with a long history of being able to manufacture, We're blessed with great institutions that could drive innovation. We work with 8 different academic universities and talent across the region, and even going into Illinois to bring that talent. And so a lot of the learnings have been not, and I'll say it this way, not bringing the talent to the job, bringing the job to the talent. And so by being able to revolutionize the job classes and the training programs, we're being able to reach out to that talent and put them in programs. Lastly, I'll mention is we have a program called the Cohort Pathway Initiative. And the idea there is to be able to expose different communities to opportunities and jobs first. First, we start with the job, not first with the training, so that they know once they go in a pathway, there's a company with a job offer where they can start. And these are well-paying jobs in the pharmaceutical community. These are $70,000, $80,000, even at a certificate level. These are significant positions that can make transformational change for individuals. So that's some of the areas we're working on and some of the things we've seen that have been very effective to unlock our talent in our region.
So Tony, make this concrete for me in terms of numbers. If you think about the next 10 years, what number of jobs might come out of this? Is there a range from the low end could be this, the high end could be that? What is the objective number of jobs that are the PhD level, the certificate level? Do you have a sense of how that breaks down?
Yeah, in fact, if you maybe some of you may have attended last week, Washington University, Cabby, Michael, and Seafood and team released an economic impact assessment. So where we're going in regards to our goals, in the next 10 years, we're focusing on bringing in 25 medicines. We currently have 6 that are being worked on, led by a brain cancer drug that treats glioblastoma. And that drug will be manufactured here in St. Louis with a small business versus being produced currently in foreign countries. It gives us stability of supply chain, cost controls. The magnitude after those 5 years will be $1.2 billion based on the research that Washington University and Cabby have done to the local economy. We're currently contributing over $350 million on those 6 medicines that we're developing right now. And those jobs, we've already hired 20 in the last 18 months, and 50% of those jobs are from underrepresented communities, which was an important goal for us. There is talent. We need to unlock that talent and give them visibility into a career in the pharmaceutical sector. And Senator Williams and I have talked about very closely having these opportunities exist at centers that are in his region and North City, where there's an incredible body of talent that we could mobilize. A long-term goal, 300 medicines, which represents 25% of all medicines that are prescribed in the United States. This will be well over $17 billion to the region, well over 500 jobs, and we're on track for 125 jobs in the next 5 years. Now, I want to also highlight that these jobs are unique in that they're portable. In other words, you may enter into pharmaceutical tech in regards to a quality assurance, quality control job, but then you're portable. You can go into other medical devices. So they have portability in attracting them both here to stay here or bringing up our talent.
That's great. So Senator Williams, one of the things that I'd love to hear your take on is the way that policy interacts with all of these factors. And sometimes for those of us that don't sit in the policy world, it can be difficult to see the direct influence between the legislative choices at the local, the state, the national level that influence these outcomes. So when you think about it from your perspective, if the types of things that we're hearing from Tony and Jason and others, things that we've heard along the way, are to come to fruition, what are the policy levers, shifts that are required to drive those types of things into action?
Yeah, absolutely. First, thank you for hosting this Washington University Olin Business School. It's really good to see so many familiar faces. I think there's a couple places. When it comes to policy, we get so consumed in, let's just tackle the policy. And believe it or not, it simply puts us in this really unfortunate silo. So I think it starts initially, at least for me as a leader, with that conversation. And it starts with our region. When I talk to leaders throughout our entire state, it's simple. St. Louis as a region makes up 45% of the GDP, meaning this region drives the economy for the entire state of Missouri. And we start there. There has to be hand-in-hand partnership with industry leaders and
we have to acknowledge and own the fact that we invest in our communities, we invest in our people, and we invest in our future. So when you think about workforce readiness, and Tony was talking about API, which has been something we've been working on now for a couple of years, there is a significant investment from the state of Missouri that my office led, but it wouldn't have been possible without the insight and the perspective and the leadership of Tony Sardella and his team at API. When you think about our state post-pandemic, we've traveled all over the world, and we've learned that a lot of countries are looking at the middle of the country. All over the world, we're on the global stage, and it's simple because it makes sense logistically. Missouri is a great state to do business in. And also, for those who don't know, not only do we have the Cardinals and the Blues and the Royals and the Chiefs, but we also have a railroad that can take goods and get anything we need from Canada to Mexico, and it goes right through this state here. So it starts with that conversation, and then that's how you start getting constructive policy. I think it's also important to really pay attention to how do we go about things for the future. When you talk about advancing our workforce, and I work very close with Greater St. Louis, and Jason Hall's leadership has been, just crucial for our region, because that workforce readiness started yesterday. So when a company talks about coming to St. Louis or any region, and you start preparing your workforce that day, you need to be prepared for that company to leave. We have to be ahead of that and making sure that that conversation is something that's happening in advance, prior to notice, and we're prepared to do that. So to answer your question, in terms of policy, I really talk about the practicality of what we do. I don't think workforce readiness, I don't think advancing for people, I don't think social and racial equity, I don't think investing in underserved and underrepresented communities, and I don't think advancing our workforce and higher education are partisan positions. And it's truly a common goal that not only our state and our region, but our country should share as well.
So I want to do a rapid fire question for the three of you, because you all are not rapid fire answerers. So I'm going to emphasize this one more time. So, and it's going to be a bit different for each of the three of you. And then we'll come back to a shared question to close this off before we open up to broader questions from the group. But Jason, you and I were talking in advance about the perceptual challenge and how it varies even a bit generationally. So obviously perception tracks reality, but not perfectly, right? We can be disconnected from reality in different ways. What are the things that move the needle from again, a perception, reputation standpoint, both locally as well as outside of the region?
I'll quote my dear friends and good colleagues up in Detroit. If you want to fix the image problem, fix the damn problem.
That was almost too rapid fire. I don't know if I was. Well, okay,
no,
so
I could. So, but the point being, it's a very Detroit way of describing it. But you don't generationally. I do think this issue plays out, and there's a generation or two above me that I think saw more acutely the rapid decline of St. Louis. I mean, the post-World War II conditions were very hard. That we are here today is built on the shoulders of those who stood up in the face of those gale force winds to give us a shot at winning this next era. We would not be in the position but for that work that was done against long odds. But you do it over time, that brand really does reflect reality. And I think it's an example. I was just hosting a large national audience at our office downtown, and in fairness to the Wall Street Journal, I mean, when you're holding people and you say, look, we're a top 23 metropolitan region, we're serious about the future, and you look out the window and see a 2-block complex that looks like Fallujah in the middle of downtown St. Louis, that dog don't hunt. In a business community, in a public sector that allows that set of conditions to exist, sends a signal that your marketing is inconsistent with the reality of the product. Secondly, I'm a strong believer in this, and I'm passionate about opportunity. I'm a first-generation high school graduate, a first-generation college graduate. I'm from the Metro East, so People don't even care where I went to high school. But it made being a gay man leading a business group much easier. So a lot to overcome there. And I also think the power of human capital, we often talk about attracting talent. And one of the lessons I learned from public engagement in the jobs plan, there's a lot of talent in this community that's already been here. They've already held on and they've not been at the table as part of it. And I think the best example, and I think probably the most powerful experiment happening in the country around inclusive growth, not in a journal, but like on the streets and in the real world, is geospatial. And we had one shot at day one. And I think with Andy Taylor's leadership to build different kinds of tables and the tone he said to build a racially inclusive model for that work, where the NGA is a very different place than where the Danforth Center was built, for example, right? So a very different context. Look at that. Harris-Stowe State University, the only HBCU in this region, is often left off that civic convening table every single time. They were at the table day one in geospatial, and look where they're at now. They are the only HBCU in the country to have a national education partnership solving the Black tech talent shortage in this country because of that partnership with the NGA. They're now the host institution for all HBCUs in the country to get HBCU undergrads exposed to a radically new emerging technology sector to reduce those barriers. Those are the kinds of things that are possible in this region by building a different table. That will change our reputation when residents that have been left behind say, we're going here and I got a seat at that table. That will change the reputation of St. Louis.
So I will, I'm gonna guide my next two respondents at the ideal.
I gave you a shot.
The ideal rapid fire is
I gave you a
somewhere,
shot, then I came back
somewhere in
with a full
between number
magazine.
one and number two there.
Yeah.
So, Senator Williams, I'll go to you next on this. You've talked a bit around university collaboration. It was just hinted a bit in Jason's answer as well. You have several university leaders, both at WashU and other places, that are here on the table. What's the ask of them? What are the needs that we have to do from a university standpoint to best participate in this work?
Yeah, there's several. As Jason stated, not only do we have Harris-Stowe State University, here's the only historically Black college and university in St. Louis, but we also have the University of Missouri St. Louis UMSL, which is the only public research institution in the St. Louis region. And then clearly here at Washington University, and even as an alum, we have not only one of the top research institutions, but some of the top partnerships in the world. So all of the talent and information and everything we need is right here. And we need to make sure that we take advantage of it. And I can't stress more than anything the importance of partnership. We spend so much time creating partnerships. You don't have to do everything, and you don't have to reinvent the wheel. If someone's doing something really well, then we need to empower them to continue to do that. So from a higher education perspective, our office is really focused on research and development tax credits. And that's been something that we've seen that's been a game changer, working very close. Greater St. Louis was a partner with that. And I think we did $10 million in tax credits where 50% would go to minority and women-owned entrepreneurs and business people to do business with research institutions, and particularly here in the state of Missouri and in the St. Louis region. Another one is some of the things that we're doing at UMSL. My office just secured $20 million, which would focus on UMSL getting an engineering program. It is walking distance from Boeing, and we have a shortage of engineers. But now we have an opportunity for an affordable opportunity for people in this region to pursue an engineering degree. The third piece I think is really important is, as university leaders and stewards of academia, I think it's so important that we really branch out into our communities and really encourage smart people to not only stay here in St. Louis, but pursue an education at our institutions. I can tell you right now, as a WashU alum, I have a better chance running into a classmate in Times Square than downtown St. Louis. And that's concerning. So, I think that partnership, figuring out how do we not only drive talent from outside of St. Louis, but retain talent here in St. Louis as well is going to be really important. And then the other thing I think is really important to talk about is we have to step outside of our bubble. And I think sometimes we become so consumed into our ecosystem that we really neglect other parts of our state. I take time to talk with a senator from Monroe County or a senator from Shannon County. And I'm very interested in what's happening in their communities in rural Missouri, as I want them to be invested in the urban core. We found a lot of ways of being successful investing in higher education because we've created a conversation that's very relevant to the rest of the state, whether it's around agriculture, ag tech, whether the things we're doing with API. And for those that didn't really grasp what Tony was saying, prior to the pandemic, not only was our country very dependent on foreign countries, but when it came to getting access to things like PPE, a lot of instances, things that were very important and necessities during the pandemic, we had to depend on foreign countries. I think at one point in time, our state got faulty PPE, which cost the state several millions of dollars, and we still had to pivot and figure out where we were going to get that to keep people safe during the pandemic due to the exposure of COVID-19. So these are very, very important things that are happening right now. And I think the more invested we get into them, the closer we bring that conversation to where we are, I think it advances things to the next level. And lastly, but not least, always remember that life moves at the speed of relationships. Don't use this as an opportunity to just be in a room and talk about issues. Figure out, how do we all get connected? If you're working on something that's meaningful, we all want to be a part of it. We want to learn about it. We want to invest in it. I'm looking at Vic. Him and Mike Weaver are doing some things. And, there's a lot of folks I see around, Bessie Cohen, so many different people that I can name that are doing great things. Let's all make sure that we're talking to each other. Don't go back to your bubble. If you care about where you went to high school, do what I do with my colleagues in rural Missouri. They come to St. Louis and they say, well, what do I do about the high school question? I say, well, where are you from? They say, well, I'm from Higginsville. Okay, you from Higginsville. Tell them that you went to Higginsville Country Day.
It's a great school. It's a really.
And when someone says, well, I just checked, there's not a Higginsville Country Day. Yes, it is. They went to Higginsville in the country during the day. Thank you guys.
So one last question for Tony. Tony, you have your chance to strike the balance on the rapid fire. I was maybe a little bit closer, so I think right now it's third, second, but Tony, to close us off, and then we'll open up for some final questions here. But obviously API is a massive opportunity. And at the same point, you mentioned the job potential is around 500 or so jobs if these things land. We need more than 500 jobs. And so as you think about the lessons from API as applied to other industry clusters, what are 2 or 3 takeaways that you would offer to those that are working in similar types of initiatives, but in different sectors?
Yeah. Keyword innovation, innovative manners, and I'll give you some examples of this. API Innovation Center wouldn't exist thanks to Senator Williams and his efforts to see something we saw very early on. And that was creating a very novel, innovative model to bring growth, economic growth and jobs here. The reason we got the federal award and got, frankly, I'd say many times, we're probably more well-known in Washington, D.C. among all leaderships in the administration than we are in St. Louis. Regularly having conversations with heads of departments like DHHS and directors of pandemic response, Office of Science and Technology Policy. The reason is this: under the leadership, Senator Williams, we created a novel private-public nonprofit model to build stability in our drug supply chain. We are the only ones that have done it this way. And what the federal administration is really greatly appreciating is that the state stepped up, thanks to leadership, together with Senator Huff and Governor Parson and Senator Williams, to create a model that both invested in new technology through instruments like the Missouri Technology Corporation that provided us funding. We were able to invent new technologies. And the reason I say that from a model in other areas is that leadership and that innovation allows for new job classes, new opportunities to bring more jobs here and compete. We were not going to try and bring jobs from China to St. Louis making the medicines the exact same way. We're leapfrogging them. We're using novel technology on how to produce it. Just give you the magnitude of that technology. When you typically make a pharmaceutical drug, this stage, about half this stage going straight up 2 stories, is a tank that will produce it. The technology now we're deploying here in St. Louis with small businesses and large is about the size of this chair. Right? We've miniaturized it. If anyone remembers the days of mainframe computing, we've miniaturized the production process. We can produce now in less than 2 weeks the entire nation's supply of a brain cancer drug that's been repeatedly in shortage and costing people their lives. That type of innovation creates not just jobs here, but novel advanced positions in geospatial. So it's not just about traditional geospatial, it's advanced geospatial technology. All the work that Jason and GSL have been doing around geospatial and the plan and drones and new data centric and new 5G commuting capabilities. These are all novel advanced. And I wouldn't, I'd be amiss if I didn't say, very early on when we did APIC, collaboration is another key thing. We have to collaborate, not cooperate. You know, I came to Jason very early on and said, I think given our manufacturing base in Missouri, we're one of the top manufacturers, we are by state the #1 active pharmaceutical ingredient manufacturer by state in the country. That's not a massive amount, because as a nation, we're small, but we're #1. And I said, Jason, could you convene the community so we could have a dialogue of seizing this opportunity where the federal government wishes to invest in US-based infrastructure capacity? And we did it like that, had a huge, I mean, I think you convened 30 people in the community to have the discussion. One was Sam here from Cortex, and without his support in the early stages, we couldn't have grown from our embryonic. So innovation to create different jobs that we can compete, not just bring. And collaboration, because that's actually one of our greatest competitive advantages. If I have another 30 seconds, do I have 30?
You have 15 seconds. I'm giving you 15.
Yeah.
And a follow-up, 15 seconds as well. Don't let me start the clock here. Go ahead, Tony,
Yeah.
please.
20 years ago, I started a data science company. It was AI and machine learning before anyone knew what that was. And it still exists. I sold it several years ago. It's a large data science organization. And, you know, part of that at the time when I started it was something that St. Louis had that no one else had. I started talking, Cortex didn't exist, so there was no defined community. Started talking to different people, and I was absolutely struck, because I'm originally from Toronto, Canada, then Chicago, and then Monsanto brought me here over 25 years ago to St. Louis. And I was struck at the incredible amount of support I had. Oh, let me find you a good CTO. Let me get you a good person in sales. Let me help you grow this company, which became the fastest growing company at one point in Missouri. And so this is a critical piece. It is a key differentiator for our state and for St. Louis. I don't think people realize how different it is in other cities.
Jason?
Yeah, I want to emphasize this because I think sometimes we hear the word collaboration and it feels good and it's fluffy, and a lot of times what it's meant is come to the table to make sure you're not on the menu. And I do think in this post-pandemic era, and as I've seen sort of generational changes in leadership, that we're no longer accepting it's okay to preside over the ash pile as long as you're on top. People want to work together to solve real problems at scale. And it is a superpower. It is a superpower. Whether it's the work around immigration and refugees, I mean, I am arm in arm with the Refugee Resettlement Agency. That is highly unusual in this country for the business group to be that linked. I was on an interview with the New York Times last week. That gets their attention because it is the kind of thing. So if you want that national earned media, you need to do what you need to do. Finally, I'll end this. One of the big droughts that we had to solve, and we've worked very closely with Senator Williams on this, that we heard during the jobs plan, was often anchored in backward-looking losses, and nothing represented that more than not having nonstop air service to continental Europe for 20 years after the last TWA flight. Said, okay, that's what we need to work on. Let's go do it. Let's open this dialogue with Lufthansa, one of the 5 largest airlines in the world. And it was a true public-private partnership that negotiated that. I mean, think about it in the old world, if there were 5 different business groups, we are a speck of dust to an airline that is one of the 5 largest in the world. That is not what they want to deal with. They want to know who is the public sector, who is the private sector, and what are we shaking hands on, and can you deliver? But I will say this, the way this community treated them when they were here, what they saw, particularly around the immigrant and refugee community, truly inspired them. They fly back here for groundbreakings today because they have friendships with people here and they feel a part of this community. They had me come out 45 minutes at a global officers and directors meeting with the chairman of the company. And they said, we've never done this with a community before. Again, we're a speck of dust. And this was just last year. They said, we want you to spend 45 minutes and just tell these people from around the world, the leadership of our company, the St. Louis story, because we opened up routes last year in Nairobi, in Portland, in St. Louis. We never experienced anything in a collaborative spirit and a public-private partnership like we experienced in St. Louis. Let that sink in. And when people show up, not fighting for credit and fighting, for things that probably shouldn't even exist, but really focusing on the customer and how people hear us, receive us, and feel when we're doing this work together, that can become a superpower. And I just please don't lose that, because it sounds fluffy, but it is so real. And I am a firmer believer in that today than when we started this journey 4 years ago.
So in the spirit of what Senator Williams mentioned at the tail end of his comments around connecting across these relationships, I'm actually going to encourage you to catch these three at the break, right? In large part because my dean comes after me, and so if I step into his time, I might never be on this stage again. But I think what you should see here and what you should hear here is the potential that comes from creative ideas, creative models of ownership, creative models of strategy, creative technologies, collaborations that exist across relationship lines. And that's not an abstract concept. It's things that are formed over cups of coffee and lunches and connections and events like this. So really grateful for the three of you and all the work that you do. And I want to now turn it over to Mike to close us off.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you to the panel. Peter's moderating of panels is just a wonder. And it reminded me of feedback I once got on student evaluation, who said, Professor Mazzio never fails to say in 50 words what could have been said in 5. So thank you very much for making the questions short as well. Never. I asked to go last instead of welcoming you at the beginning, because I wanted to have an opportunity to, in addition to thank you and share some short prepared remarks, I wanted to have the opportunity to reflect a little bit on what I experienced in participating and viewing the events, from the research presented at the beginning to our last panel today. And more than anything, as the dean of the Olin Business School, or as we may now rebrand it, Olin Country Day Business School, what I feel strongly is that we have both the honor and the responsibility as the business school in this region, as the business school, in my view, in this region. We have the honor and the responsibility to convene groups like this with leaders like these three and the ones on the previous panels to think about how we can address the challenges and leverage the opportunities of our region. And I think when I reflect on how we as a business school can be a part of that, I think about a couple of things, mirroring what you folks and others have said, and starting with this research, right? Because one of the things that an educational research institution can do, you all in a lot of what you do have to be cheerleaders, but we can help you ask the tough questions. So I appreciate, Jason, what you reported about the foreign-born population and how it's grown. But, we had a question earlier today about belonging in this community, and our Latino population in St. Louis is among the lowest in the country as a share of the population. And we can, through our data analysis and through our work and understanding not only at Olin, but across the university, we can ask the questions like, why is that? And what can we do to take advantage of this population that's coming to the US and make us a stronger community as a consequence. So the work that Sithu and that Michael are doing in CABI and we're doing across Olin and across WashU, we really want it to be additive to the community challenges. And we have some remarkable researchers across our various academic areas who can participate in that. Is Sean still here? Sean Armstrong, I have to call Sean out because I really feel like as I've started as dean, just over a year ago, Sean and I are kind of kindred spirits in terms of what we can do collectively and together to really think about professional development in this region. And we are really partners in that in so many ways. I want to share with you a fact that I learned about the Olin Business School recently, which I keep repeating, so maybe you've already heard it. 50 St. Louis-based CEOs have a degree from Olin. And, Joe mentioned earlier that there are 120 companies in RBC. So that's a really good percentage. Why is that happening? Because organizations that want to make their future here see this institution, this university, from CAPS to Olin as an opportunity to build up their teams, identify their high potentials, and bring them into leadership roles in their organizations, which as those businesses grow, the opportunities for the region grow as well. And so I just, I need to take, 15 seconds for a commercial for Olin. We have tremendous opportunities, whether they be in degree programs or in non-degree education, to help and partner with you in that endeavor. And so please, we're going to be out there reaching out like never before. Peter and others have mentioned that Olin has a strategic plan that we have been working on for the past 8 months that we're going to unveil this fall. An important pillar of that strategic plan is regional partnerships. We want to be the business school that is in St. Louis and for St. Louis. And that means partnerships, understanding what the business community needs here, and really connecting as, maybe educational institution can uniquely do. I certainly have taken up residence breakfast, lunch, and dinner, I think some days at the St. Louis Club, trying to make that happen. So any opportunities, I would love to personally connect with you and then connect you to my team and the faculty who can help you along that journey. Now, I've been talking and not looking at my remarks, so let me just highlight a couple of things. One is a huge thank you to Michael and Sithu for bringing this all together. I challenged them to fill Emerson Auditorium, and they did a fantastic job. So thank you to everyone who joined us. Thank you for the moderators and the panel. Lisa, all the great work that you, Maggie, and your team are doing to further our partnership between WashU and Olin and the St. Louis community. We really appreciate that. And, as Peter was saying, we have an opportunity to continue this conversation and make those connections. So I invite you all to hang out a little bit, have some lunch, and we really appreciate the honor and the privilege to convene groups like this. Thank you very much.